I buried my only son on a Tuesday morning under a sky the color of a fresh bruise. My name is Cedric Robinson, but the men I served with in the Supply Corps used to call me Big Ced. I am 70 years old and I have seen war, I have seen famine, and I have seen the kind of suffering that changes a man's soul, but nothing prepared me for the coldness standing right next to me at the graveside. My daughter-in-law Jessica waited until the very first shovel of dirt hit the mahogany casket to lean in and whisper the words that would start a war. She said, "Dad, the house is too big for you now, so I have already called the movers and the van for Green Meadows Nursing Home will be here to pick you up at 8 tomorrow morning." She did not shed a tear. She did not hold my hand. She just checked her watch and smiled. But she made one fatal miscalculation. She thought she was disposing of a senile old man. She did not realize she was declaring war on a logistics commander who knows exactly how to dismantle an enemy without firing a single shot. Before I tell you how I brought her world crashing down around her, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to deal with a family member who loved money more than their own blood. The cemetery was quiet except for the drone of the priest and the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. I stood there feeling like a statue carved out of black granite. I wanted to cry. I wanted to fall to my knees and scream at the heavens for taking Marcus, my boy, my only child, just 2 weeks after his 40th birthday. A workplace accident, they said. A pallet of steel beams. Quick, brutal, unfair. But I did not cry. I learned a long time ago that tears blur your vision, and right now I needed to see everything clearly. Standing to my right was Jessica. She was wearing a black dress that was too tight and too short for a funeral, and her face was hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses. She wasn't looking at the casket. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen in a blur of text messages. I could almost smell the calculation coming off her mixing with her expensive perfume. She wasn't mourning a husband. She was planning a liquidation. To my left stood Leo, my grandson. He is 10 years old and he is the only reason my heart is still beating. He was holding my hand so tight I thought his little fingers might break. He was shaking. He looked up at me with eyes that were red and swollen, and I squeezed his hand back, trying to transfer some of my strength to him. I built my life for them, for Marcus, for Leo. The house on the hill in the suburbs of Atlanta with the 4 bedrooms and the wraparound porch was my legacy. Bernice and I bought it 30 years ago. We paid for it with sweat and overtime and missed holidays. It was where Marcus learned to walk. It was where Bernice took her last breath 3 years ago. It is not just wood and brick. It is a monument to my family, and Jessica wanted it. The priest finished his prayer. He stepped back. The 2 men from the funeral home stepped forward with their shovels. The sound of the dirt hitting the wood is a sound you never forget. Thud, thud. It is the sound of a door closing forever. That was when she made her move. Jessica took a half step closer to me. She didn't lower her voice out of respect for the dead. She lowered it so the other mourners wouldn't hear her venom. "Cedric," she said, and she didn't even call me Dad this time. "We need to be realistic. You can't maintain that big house alone. The stairs are dangerous. The yard is too much work. It is irresponsible." I kept my eyes on the grave. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of my own home, Jessica. I still run 5 miles a week. I maintain the garden myself." She let out a short, sharp sigh of impatience. "It is not about what you think you can do. It is about what is best for the family assets. I have already made the arrangements. Green Meadows is a lovely facility. They have activities. You will have a room with a view of the parking lot. It is efficient." Green Meadows. The name sounded pastoral, but I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the elderly on the other side of town. A place where they sedate you to keep you quiet, and the smell of bleach never quite covers the smell of urine. I turned to look at her then. I took off my glasses so she could see my eyes. "I am not going to a home, Jessica. That is my house. My name is on the deed." She smirked. It was a small, ugly twisting of her lips. "For now," she said. "But Marcus left a mess, Cedric. A big mess." "What are you talking about?" "Gambling," she lied. I knew she was lying because Marcus never gambled. He was the most frugal man I ever knew. But she continued smooth as silk. He owed a lot of money to some very bad people. Loan sharks. Gangsters. The kind of people who don't send letters, they send guys with baseball bats. She glanced down at Leo, who was still clinging to my hand. They know where we live, Cedric. They know where Leo sleeps. If we don't sell the house immediately to pay them off, they are going to come for him. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the stubborn old man who got his grandson hurt because he wanted to keep his garden? I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavy and hard like a stone. She was using my son's memory to lie, and she was using my grandson's safety as a weapon. She knew Leo was my weakness. She knew I would burn the world down to keep a single hair on his head from being harmed. I looked at Leo. He was looking at the casket, oblivious to the fact that his mother was bargaining with his life. How much, I asked, my voice low. Enough that the house is the only way to cover it, she said. I need you to sign it over to me. I can handle the sale. I have connections in real estate. I can move it fast. Cash buyers. No questions asked. But you need to be out. Tonight. Tonight. Yes, she said, checking her nails. The staging crew comes tomorrow morning. We need to make it look modern. Get rid of all that old junk. Your furniture. Bernice's sewing room. It all has to go. She was talking about erasing 40 years of my life like it was a stain on a carpet. I looked at her, and for a second I wanted to break her. I wanted to tell her that I managed logistics for battalions in the desert. I wanted to tell her that I can spot a hustle from a mile away. I wanted to tell her that Marcus didn't gamble, but I knew she had been draining his accounts for her image for years. But I looked at Leo. If I fought her right here, right now, she would take him. She would cut me off. She would disappear with him, and I would never know if he was safe. I needed time. I needed a vantage point, and most of all, I needed her to think she had won. In the military, they teach you that sometimes you have to retreat to lead the enemy into a kill box. You have to let them get comfortable. You have to let them overextend their supply lines. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack. I tried to look every bit the 70-year-old tired, grieving man she thought I was. Is Leo safe? I asked. If you sign the papers, she said. And I can see him. On weekends, she lied. I knew it was a lie because her eyes flicked away for a fraction of a second. Once you are settled in the home. I nodded slowly. Okay, Jessica. If it is for Leo, I will do it. She didn't try to hide her triumph. She pulled a folded document out of her designer purse right there at the graveside. Good, she said. I knew you would be reasonable. The lawyer will bring the rest of the paperwork to the house tonight. Pack light, Cedric. You won't need much where you are going. She turned and walked away toward her car, her heels clicking on the paved path. She didn't wait for me. She didn't wait for Leo. She just walked away, texting on her phone, probably telling her contractor that the property was secured. I stood there with Leo in the silence. Grandpa Leo whispered, "Are you going away?" I knelt down on my bad knee. I looked him in the eye. Leo, listen to me. I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? He nodded, tears spilling over. I am going to have to go away for a little while, I said. But I am not leaving you. I am going on a mission. Do you remember the missions we play with your toy soldiers? He nodded. Stealth missions. Exactly. This is a stealth mission. Mom is going to move us around. Things are going to change. But I need you to keep your eyes open. I need you to remember everything you see. Can you be my scout? Yes, Grandpa. I hugged him. I hugged him so tight I could feel his little heart beating against my chest. I stood up. I looked at the fresh dirt on Marcus's grave. I promise you, son, I whispered. She will not keep what she has stolen. She thinks she buried me today, too. But she just planted a seed, and the harvest is going to be bitter. I took Leo's hand and we walked toward the car. Jessica was waiting in the driver's seat, engine running, air conditioning blasting. She honked the horn impatiently. I walked slow. Let her wait. Let her think I am slow. Let her think I am defeated. Because the man getting into that car wasn't a victim. He was a general going undercover behind enemy lines. And the war had just begun. The car ride home from the cemetery was silent, but it was a silence that screamed. I sat in the back seat next to Leo, who had fallen asleep with his head against the window, his breath fogging up the glass. In the front, Jessica drove with one hand on the wheel and the other tapping furiously on her phone screen. She was already coordinating the invasion. I looked out at the passing suburbs of Atlanta, the neighborhoods I had watched grow for 30 years, and I felt a strange detachment. It was the same feeling I used to get before a deployment. The world looks the same. The trees are green, the sky is blue, but you know that everything has changed because you are entering a combat zone. When we pulled into the driveway of the house Bernice and I had bought in 1992, I expected to feel the comfort of home. I expected to see the azaleas we planted. I expected to feel the safety of the walls that had sheltered my family for decades. Instead, I felt like I was walking into a trap. Jessica unlocked the front door and marched in her heels, clicking on the hardwood like gunshots. I followed, carrying Leo, who was still groggy. I took him upstairs to his room, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead. "Sleep tight, Scout," I whispered. "Remember the mission. Eyes open." I closed his door softly and walked down the hall to the master bedroom. My bedroom. The room where I used to wake up next to Bernice every morning. I opened the door and froze. It had only been 6 hours since we left for the funeral. 6 hours. But in that time, someone had been here. Neon orange stickers. They were everywhere. There was a sticker on the antique mahogany dresser Bernice had inherited from her grandmother, a sticker on the television, a sticker on the lamp, and there in the corner on Bernice's sewing machine, the singer she used to make Marcus's Halloween costumes and hem my work pants. There was a tag that read, "For sale as is $50. $50. She had put a price tag on my wife's soul. I walked over to the machine. I touched the cold metal wheel. I could still see the faint wear marks where Bernice's hands had rested for thousands of hours. Jessica didn't see a family heirloom. She saw $50 of quick cash to pay a gambling debt or buy a purse. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room. It was the same story. The leather recliner I sat in to watch the Braves games tagged. The dining room table where we ate Thanksgiving dinner tagged. The painting of the African savanna that Marcus had bought me with his first paycheck tagged. She hadn't just called the movers, she had called an estate liquidator. She was stripping the meat off the bones before the body was even cold. Jessica walked into the room, still on her phone. "Oh good, you see the system," she said, not even looking up. "The green tags are for donation. The orange tags are for the estate sale tomorrow. I need you to go through your personal clothes tonight, Cedric. Keep it to one suitcase. Everything else gets a green tag. We don't want clutter at Green Meadows." I looked at her. She was standing in the middle of my living room, treating my life like a garage sale. "You didn't waste any time," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were curled into fists at my sides. "Efficiency is key," she said, tapping a long acrylic nail against her screen. "The faster we clear this out, the faster we can get it on the market." "The market is hot, Cedric. We can't afford to be sentimental." Sentimental. That is what she called 40 years of history. I walked past her into the kitchen. I needed water. I needed to cool down the fire that was starting to burn in my chest. If I stayed in that room, I was going to say something I would regret. I was going to show my hand. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard, sitting on the bench by the rose bushes. I watched the sun go down. I watched the lights come on in the neighbors' houses. They were having dinner. They were watching TV. They were living normal lives. They had no idea that right next door a coup was taking place. Night fell heavy and dark. I went back inside. The house was quiet. Leo was asleep. Jessica was in the guest room, which she had claimed as her office, probably calculating how much my life was worth on the open market. I went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers in my uniform, staring at the ceiling fan. I listened. In the military, you learn to listen to the silence. You learn that silence isn't empty. It is full of information. And tonight, the silence of my house felt wrong. It felt staged. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a noise. It was soft. A click, then a hiss. It was coming from the kitchen. I sat up. My senses were on high alert. I moved to the door and opened it a crack. The hallway was dark. I crept down the hall. My knees ached, but I moved with the silence of a man who used to inspect supply depots at midnight to catch thieves. I didn't turn on any lights. I used the ambient light from the street lamps outside. I reached the kitchen doorway. The smell hit me first. Rotten eggs, mercaptan, gas. The kitchen was filled with it. And there, standing by the stove, was a shadow. It was Jessica. She wasn't wearing her funeral dress anymore. She was wearing a silk robe. She was standing perfectly still, her hand hovering over the burner knobs. I watched her. I held my breath. She turned the knob all the way to the left. The hiss grew louder. She didn't light it. She just let the gas flow. Then she took a step back. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She tapped the screen. The light from the phone illuminated her face. She wasn't scared. She was focused. She was framing a shot. She hit record. Then she started screaming. "Oh my God, Dad! Dad, wake up! Oh my God, help!" She screamed like she was being murdered. She ran toward the hallway, still holding the phone up, still recording. "Fire, Dad! What did you do?" I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I walked calm and slow right into the kitchen. I reached over and turned the knob off. The hissing stopped. I turned to face her. Jessica was standing there, phone pointed at my face, the flashlight blinding me. She was hyperventilating, but her eyes were dry. "Dad," she panted, "you left the gas on. You almost killed us all. I came down for water and the whole house smells like gas. You were trying to make tea, weren't you? You forgot to light it. Oh my God, we could have exploded." I stood there blinking in the harsh light of her phone. "I wasn't trying to make tea, Jessica," I said calmly. "I was in my room asleep." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, moving the camera closer to my face. "You are confused. You are wandering. This is exactly what the doctor warned me about. Dementia, sundowning. You are a danger to yourself, Cedric. You are a danger to Leo." She said the name like a weapon. Leo. I looked at the stove. Then I looked at her. I saw it then. The setup. The ambush. This wasn't an accident. This was a psychological operation. A psyop. She was manufacturing a crisis to justify a forced extraction. She needed evidence. She needed a reason to bypass the legal process and get emergency guardianship. A senile old man who leaves the gas on isn't safe. A judge would sign the order in 5 minutes. And she was filming it. She was building her case in real time. "Look at you," she said, her voice thick with fake concern for the camera. "You don't even know where you are, do you? You are just standing there. Dad, this is serious. I can't let you stay here. I can't risk my son's life because you are too stubborn to admit you need help." I looked into the lens of the camera. I saw my own reflection. An old black man in wrinkled clothes, looking tired, looking confused. That was the narrative she was writing. And she was the director. If I argued, if I yelled, if I told her I saw her turn the knob, she would just say I was paranoid. She would say I was hallucinating. Aggression is a symptom of dementia. If I fought back, I was proving her point. I remembered a briefing from 30 years ago. When you are caught in a trap, do not thrash. Thrashing tightens the snare. You go still. You assess. You wait for the hunter to come check the line. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. I made my hands tremble just a little bit. I don't remember turning it on," I whispered. My voice sounded weak, fragile. Jessica lowered the phone slightly. A flash of triumph crossed her face. "Of course you don't. Dad," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That is the problem. You don't remember, just like you don't remember agreeing to go to Green Meadows. But this settles it." She stopped recording. The light went out. The kitchen was dark again. She stepped closer to me. The mask dropped. Her face was hard, cold, and predatory. "Listen to me, Cedric," she hissed. "You are going to sign those papers tomorrow. The lawyer is coming at 9. You are going to sign the power of attorney, and you are going to sign the deed transfer. And then you are going to get in that van and go to the home. Or what I asked. Or I show this video to the judge," she said. "I show them that you tried to burn the house down with your grandson inside. I will file for an emergency restraining order. I will have you declared mentally incompetent by the state. And I will make sure you never see Leo again. I will tell him you tried to kill him, Cedric. I will tell him his grandpa is a monster." I felt a chill that went deeper than my bones. She would do it. She was ruthless enough to poison a child's mind against the only family he had left. If I fought her now, she would cut me off from Leo. And Leo was the mission. I looked at her. I looked at the woman my son had married. I wondered how Marcus had been so blind. But then I realized love is the ultimate camouflage. It hides the flaws until it is too late. I took a deep breath. I let out a long, shaky sigh. "You win, Jessica," I said. "I won't fight you. Just don't show that video. Don't tell Leo." She smiled. It was the smile of a shark that just tasted blood. "Good choice, Dad," she said. "Now go to bed. We have a big day tomorrow." She turned and walked out of the kitchen. She went back to her office, probably to upload the video to a cloud server just in case. I stood in the dark kitchen, smelling the lingering scent of gas. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was a confused old man who had just surrendered. She didn't know that she had just confirmed my intelligence. I walked over to the stove. I looked at the knob. It was a safety knob. You have to push it in to turn it. You have to use force. You don't just bump into it. It was deliberate. It was an act of war. I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. In the military, we have a term for this: asymmetric warfare. When the enemy is bigger, stronger, and has more firepower, you don't attack them head on. You use their own momentum against them. You let them overextend. You let them think they are winning until they are so deep in your territory they can't find their way out. Jessica wanted me to be weak, so I would be weak. She wanted me to be senile, so I would be senile. She wanted me to sign, so I would sign. But what she didn't know was that a signature is only as good as the paper it is written on. And she hadn't bothered to check the paper trail of my life. She didn't know about the trust. 5 years ago, when Bernice got sick, we sat down with my old friend Vance. Vance isn't just a lawyer, he is a brother in arms. We served in the Gulf together. He handles asset protection for people who have enemies. We put the house, the savings, the investments, everything into an irrevocable trust, the Bernice and Leo Protection Trust. I am not the owner of this house. I am just the trustee, the manager. And the beneficiary is Leo, not Marcus, not Jessica. Leo. And the bylaws of the trust are very specific. The trustee can be removed if he becomes incapacitated. But the assets are locked. They cannot be sold, transferred, or leveraged without the unanimous consent of the board. And the board is me and Vance. If I sign a quitclaim deed transferring the house to Jessica, it is worthless. It is like me signing over the Brooklyn Bridge. I can't give away what I don't own. But Jessica didn't check the title. She was too greedy. She saw an old man in a big house and she saw dollar signs. She assumed I was simple. She assumed I held the deed in my name like a normal person. She assumed wrong. I lay back on the pillow. I closed my eyes. I was going to let her win the battle tomorrow. I was going to let her humiliate me. I was going to let her pack me into a van and ship me off to a warehouse for the dying. I was going to let her spend money she didn't have to renovate a house she didn't own. I was going to let her dig the hole. And when she was deep enough, when she had thrown all her dirt on top of me, I was going to pull the ladder up. I slept for 3 hours. It was the sleep of a soldier before D-Day. When I woke up, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the enemy was at the gate with a pen. I got up. I put on my most worn-out cardigan. I shuffled my feet when I walked. I put on the mask. It was showtime. The lawyer they hired was a man named Mr. Thorne, who wore a suit that cost more than my first car, but his shoes were scuffed and unpolished. In the logistics corps, you learn to look at a man's shoes first, because a man who doesn't maintain his leather is a man who cuts corners when he thinks no one is watching. Mr. Thorne was definitely cutting corners today as he sat at my dining room table, spreading out documents like a general laying out a battle map for an invasion he had already decided he would win. I shuffled into the room, making sure to drag my left foot just a little heavier than necessary. It was an old war injury that usually only flared up when it rained, but today the sun was shining bright over Atlanta, and I dragged it anyway because they needed to see a broken man. I wore my reading glasses perched on the very tip of my nose, and I let my mouth hang open slightly, giving them the look of a man whose gears were slipping and whose engine was running on fumes. Jessica was standing behind the lawyer, vibrating with a nervous, greedy energy that filled the room like static electricity. She kept checking the front window, looking for the van from Green Meadows, and every time a car passed, she would jump. Mr. Robinson, the lawyer said, sliding a thick stack of paper toward me across the mahogany table my wife had polished every Sunday for 20 years. We just need a few signatures to get your affairs in order. Jessica tells me you are eager to downsize and simplify your life. Simplify. That was a nice, polite word for being stripped of everything you own and tossed into a warehouse to wait for death. I sat down slowly, taking a long time to adjust my glasses, and I saw Jessica roll her eyes and check her watch again. "Just sign it, Dad," she said, her voice tight and impatient. "The driver will be here in 20 minutes. We don't have all day to sit around while you stare at the paper." I looked down at the document. In big, bold letters at the top, it said, "Quitclaim deed." I know exactly what a quitclaim deed is. It is the quickest and dirtiest way to transfer property because it offers no warranties and no protection. It basically says whatever interest I have in this property I am giving to you right now with no takebacks. And underneath that was a general durable power of attorney document. That was the key to the kingdom. If I signed that she could access my bank accounts, my pension, my medical records, she could legally become me. I looked up at her and I made my eyes look watery and scared. If I sign this, I asked, my voice trembling just the right amount to sell the performance. Will I still get to see Leo? You promised I could see him on weekends. Jessica's face softened instantly into a mask of pity that was more insulting than her anger ever could be. Of course, Dad, she cooed, leaning over to pat my shoulder with a hand that felt cold through my shirt. Every weekend. We will bring him to visit. Or maybe when you are settled, we can bring you here for Sunday dinner. We want you to be part of the family. Liar. I saw the micro-expression in her eyes, the slight twitch of her left eyelid that gave her away. I had seen that same twitch on a supply sergeant in Kuwait right before he told me a shipment of MREs had fallen off a truck when I knew for a fact he had sold them on the black market. She had no intention of letting me see Leo ever again. Once I was in that home, I was going to be isolated. She would tell Leo I was too sick. She would tell him I didn't remember him. She would erase me from his life. That lie was the fuel I needed. If she had been honest, if she had said, Cedric, we just want the money, but you can see the boy, I might have hesitated. But she tried to play me. I looked back down at the papers, pretending to struggle with the reading, but while I was acting confused, my mind was racing, scanning the fine print with the precision of a hawk. And then I saw it. The mistake. The glorious, arrogant mistake. The quitclaim deed listed the grantor as Cedric Robinson, an individual. It did not list the grantor as Cedric Robinson, trustee of the Bernice and Leo Protection Trust. They hadn't run a title search. They hadn't checked the county records because they were too cheap and too arrogant. They assumed because I lived here and paid the bills that the deed was in my personal name. If I signed this document as an individual, I was transferring exactly what I owned personally, which was absolutely nothing. The house belonged to the trust. I was signing over a ghost. And the power of attorney was broad, yes, but the trust bylaws required 2 signatures for any transaction over $10,000, mine and Vance's. Even with my power of attorney, she couldn't crack the trust without Vance, and Vance would sooner eat his own briefcase than help her. They were handing me a loaded gun and thinking it was a pen. I reached out and took the pen from the lawyer, but I made my hand shake so bad the pen rattled against the paper, making a scratching sound. Here, Dad, let me help you, Jessica said, reaching out to steady my hand. I pulled away sharply. No, I whispered. I can do it. I am the man of the house. For now, she muttered under her breath so low she thought I couldn't hear. I put the pen to the paper. I signed, Cedric Robinson. I signed the deed. I signed the transfer of title for the car I no longer drove. I signed the power of attorney. I signed away my life, my rights, and my dignity. Or so they thought. I watched the ink dry. It looked black and permanent. Jessica snatched the papers away before I could even put the cap back on the pen. She handed them to the lawyer, who flipped through them, quickly checking for signatures like a bank teller checking for counterfeits. It looks like everything is in order, Mr. Thorne said, closing his briefcase with a snap. Congratulations, Ms. Robinson. You now have full control of the estate. Jessica let out a breath she had been holding for days. She smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated greed. It was the smile of a woman who just won the lottery without buying a ticket. Good, she said. Then she turned to me, and the mask was gone completely now. There was no more pity, no more fake sweetness. The van is outside, she said, pointing to the window. I looked out. A white van with the logo Green Meadows Transport was idling at the curb. It looked like a dog catcher's truck. You have 5 minutes, she said. 1 suitcase, Cedric. That is what we agreed. No clutter. I stood up, moving slowly, leaning on the table for support. Can I say goodbye to Leo? I asked. He is at school, she said, checking her phone and dismissing me. We didn't want to upset him. It is better this way. Clean break. Clean break. That is what she called tearing a grandfather away from his grandson. I nodded. Okay, I said. I walked to my bedroom where my real packing was already done. I had a small duffel bag with a few changes of clothes, my medication, and a picture of Bernice. But before I left, I went to the loose floorboard under the bed and pried it up. I took out the burner phone I had bought with cash 2 days ago and the photocopy of the real trust deed, and I tucked them deep inside my socks in the bag. I walked back out to the living room where Jessica was already on the phone with a contractor. Yes, start tomorrow, she was saying. I want that wall gone. Open concept. We need to modernize this place if we want to list it for 1.5 million. She was already spending the money. She was already destroying the home Bernice had decorated. I walked past her and she didn't even look at me. I was furniture to her now. Furniture that had been moved out to make room for something new. Two large men in scrubs were waiting at the door. Mr. Robinson, one said, "We are here to take you to your new home." They took my arms. They weren't gentle. They gripped me like I was a prisoner who might run. I didn't resist. I let them guide me down the steps of the porch I had built with my own hands and past the rose bushes I had pruned for 30 years. I stopped at the van door and looked back at the house. Jessica was standing in the window watching me leave. She waved, a little sarcastic wave of her fingers. "Goodbye, old man." I looked at her and I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt pity. She thought she had won the war. She thought she had captured the castle. She didn't know that the castle was rigged to blow. I climbed into the van and the door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I sat in the back on a vinyl seat that smelled of disinfectant as we pulled away from the curb. I watched my house disappear around the corner. I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. The first phase was complete. I was inside the belly of the beast. I had given them exactly what they wanted. Now I just had to wait for them to choke on it. Green Meadows. The name conjured images of rolling hills and sunlight and maybe a gazebo where old men played chess in the afternoon. But names are just marketing, and marketing is just a polite way of lying. The reality was a squat brick building on the edge of an industrial park sandwiched between a tire depot and a storm drain. The van pulled up to the service entrance, not the front door. We were not guests. We were inventory. When the doors opened, the heat hit me first, then the smell. It was a thick, cloying cocktail of industrial strength, pine cleaner boiled cabbage, and underneath it all the sharp, unmistakable tang of urine that had soaked into the linoleum for 20 years. In the army, we called that the smell of defeat. The two men who had transported me practically dragged me out of the van. My bad leg caught on the step and I stumbled, but they didn't slow down. They marched me through a set of double doors into a hallway that was painted a color that was supposed to be calming beige but looked more like nicotine-stained yellow. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering with a rhythm that would drive a sane man mad in a week. We stopped at the nurse's station. A woman sat behind the high counter. She was large, formidable, and looked like she hadn't smiled since the Reagan administration. She didn't look at me. She looked at the clipboard the driver handed her. "Cedric Robinson," she read flatly. "Room 304, bed C." She reached over the counter. "Personal effects." I clutched my small duffel bag. It was all I had left. Inside were my clothes, my toothbrush, and hidden deep in a pair of rolled-up socks the burner phone I had bought with cash. It was my lifeline, my only weapon. "Hand it over, Mr. Robinson," she said, snapping her fingers. "Protocol. We have to inventory everything to make sure you don't have contraband." I handed her the bag. I had no choice. If I fought, they would sedate me. I had seen it happen before. She unzipped the bag and dumped it out right there on the counter. My underwear, my shirts, my picture of Bernice all spilled out for the world to see. She began sorting through it with efficient, ruthless hands. Then she found the socks. She unrolled them. The burner phone fell out onto the laminate counter with a loud clatter. She looked at the phone. Then she looked at me. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "No communication devices," she said. "That is my property," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have a right to call my lawyer." "Not according to your file," she said, tapping the computer screen. "Your daughter-in-law left very specific instructions." She provided a medical addendum stating that phone usage causes you extreme paranoia and agitation. "For your own mental health, we are to restrict all outside communication until you are stabilized." She dropped the phone into a drawer and locked it. The sound of that key turning was louder than a gunshot. "You can't do that," I said. "I just did," she replied. "Take him to his room." The orderlies grabbed me again. They marched me down the hall past rooms where old people sat in wheelchairs staring at static on televisions. We reached room 304. It was a box. 4 beds crammed into a space meant for 2. The air was hot and stagnant. There was no privacy, just thin curtains on rails that were missing half their hooks. "This is you, bed C," the orderly said, pointing to a mattress that sagged in the middle like a hammock. I sat down. The springs groaned. I looked at my roommates. In bed A, there was a man who looked like a skeleton with skin draped over it. He was asleep or in a coma, I couldn't tell. In bed B, a man was rocking back and forth, muttering a string of numbers over and over again. Bed D was empty, but the sheets were stripped, suggesting someone had left recently and not in a good way. This was it. This was the end of the line. This was where Jessica had sent me to die. I lay back on the thin pillow. I closed my eyes. And while I lay there listening to the muttering of the man in bed B, my mind traveled back to the house, my house. I knew exactly what was happening there. I didn't need a crystal ball. I knew Jessica. At that very moment, 10 miles away, the invasion was in full swing. Jessica would be standing in the center of the living room holding a glass of my expensive cognac. She would be celebrating. The obstacle was gone. The old man was in the warehouse. I imagined the scene. The sun had gone down, but the lights in the house were blazing. A white truck was parked in the driveway. Not a moving truck, a contractor's truck. She hadn't waited. She hadn't even waited for the sun to set on my departure. Start with the wall, she would be shouting over the noise of a generator. I want this whole floor open. I want to see the kitchen from the front door. A man with a sledgehammer would step up to the wall that separated the dining room from the living room. The wall where we used to mark Marcus's height with a pencil every birthday. Smash. The drywall would crumble. Dust would fill the air, coating the floors Bernice had loved. Smash. The stud would splinter. The history of my family, the physical structure of my memories was being pulverized to make way for an open concept floor plan that would appeal to a buyer with more money than taste. Upstairs, Leo would be in his room. He would hear the noise, the destruction. It would sound like a monster eating the house from the inside out. He would run downstairs, his little feet thumping on the carpet. He would stop on the landing, rubbing his eyes, seeing the dust, seeing the strangers destroying his home. "Mom," he would ask, his voice trembling, "what is happening? Where is Grandpa?" And Jessica, flushed with victory and alcohol, would turn to him. She wouldn't kneel down to hug him. She wouldn't comfort him. "Grandpa is sick, baby," she would say, her voice fake and sweet. "His brain is broken. He went to a special hospital where doctors can watch him so he doesn't hurt himself." "But I want to see him," Leo would say. "I want to call him." "You can't, Leo," she would say, turning back to the contractor. "He is very confused. He doesn't know who you are anymore. If you called him, he would just scream. He doesn't want to see us. He forgot us, Leo. It is part of the disease." She was planting the poison. She was rewriting history in real time, making me into a monster, a ghost, a vegetable, so that my grandson would stop asking for me, so that he would let me go. I clenched my fists on the bed sheets in Green Meadows. I could feel the rage boiling in my gut, hot and sharp. She thought she had won. She thought because she had taken my phone and put me in a box that I was finished. She forgot one thing. I was a logistics officer. My job wasn't to fight on the front lines. My job was to observe, to analyze supply chains, to find the weak points in a system and exploit them, to move resources from point A to point B when everyone said it was impossible. I opened my eyes. I sat up. I looked around the room. I wasn't a prisoner. I was an operator behind enemy lines. I stood up and walked to the door of the room. I leaned against the frame, just an old man watching the world go by. I watched the nurse's station. There was a rhythm to it. There is always a rhythm. The head nurse, the one with the key to the drawer, was efficient, but she was lazy. She sat in her chair and barked orders. She didn't do rounds. The orderlies were overworked and underpaid. They moved fast, cutting corners where they could. But then I saw him. A young man, maybe 22. He was wearing scrubs that were a size too big, but his sneakers were brand new Jordans. Expensive shoes. Too expensive for a kid making minimum wage wiping bedpans. He was pushing a cart of meal trays. He stopped at the station to flirt with a young nurse. He laughed too loud. He checked his phone constantly. I watched him. He moved with a swagger that didn't belong here. He was bored, he was arrogant, and he liked money. I saw him slip a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and head toward the back exit, the fire door that had a sign saying "Alarm will sound," but which I noticed was propped open with a brick to let the air in. He was the weak link. I waited. Dinner was served at 5. It was a scoop of gray mashed potatoes and something that looked like meatloaf but smelled like wet cardboard. I didn't eat. I sat there and waited. The young orderly came by to collect the trays. His name tag said Tyrell. "Hey, Pops," he said, grabbing my untouched tray. "You gotta eat. Keep your strength up." I looked at him. I looked at his shoes. "Nice kicks," I said. "Retro 4's right. The black cats. Hard to find. Tyrell stopped. He looked at me surprised. Most of the people in here didn't know what day it was, let alone what kind of sneakers he was wearing. Yeah, old school, he said, grinning. You know shoes. I know quality, I said. I also know they cost about $300 on the resale market. That is a lot of hours pushing trays. He shrugged. A man gotta look fresh. Listen, Tyrell, I said, lowering my voice. I need a favor. He stiffened. His eyes darted to the nurse's station. I can't get you pills, Pops, and I can't get you booze. So don't ask. I don't want pills, I said. I want 5 minutes. 5 minutes for what? 5 minutes with your phone. He laughed and started to pull the card away. No way. Against the rules. The dragon lady at the desk will fire me. I reached into my pocket. I didn't have my wallet. Jessica had taken that too. But I had something else. I had my watch. It was an Omega. Vintage. Bernice gave it to me for our 25th anniversary. It was worth $2,000 easy. But right now, it was just currency. I took it off my wrist. I held it out in my palm so only he could see the glint of the gold in the sapphire face. 5 minutes, I said. You let me make one call. You stand right there and watch me. And this is yours. Tyrell looked at the watch. He looked at the nurse's station. The head nurse was on the phone arguing with a vendor. She wasn't looking. He looked back at the watch. The greed in his eyes was familiar. It was the same look Jessica had. But Tyrell was honest about his greed. He just wanted the shoes. Real gold, he asked. Solid, I said. He licked his lips. Meet me by the loading dock in 10 minutes, he whispered. Bring the watch. He pushed the cart away, whistling. I sat back on the bed. My heart was hammering a steady rhythm against my ribs. I had established a supply line. Now I just needed to make the call. I wasn't going to call the police. The police would just look at the paperwork Jessica filed and say it was a civil matter. They would see a senile old man. No. I needed air support. I needed Vance. Vance wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit. We served together. He was the only man alive who knew where the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the holes. I stood up. I checked the hallway. Clear. I shuffled toward the loading dock. The war had begun, and the enemy didn't even know I had ammunition. The loading dock was a concrete slab hidden behind the kitchen, where the dumpsters sat baking in the humid Georgia heat. The air smelled of rotting vegetables and stale grease, but to me it smelled like opportunity. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to look like a confused old man who had just wandered off, but my eyes were locked on the door. 2 minutes later, Tyrell pushed it open. He looked left then right, checking for the supervisor before slipping out. He was holding an unlit cigarette in one hand and his smartphone in the other. He looked at me, and then his eyes dropped immediately to my wrist. You got it? He asked, his voice a hushed whisper. I didn't say a word. I just unclasped the Omega. The gold caught the flicker of the security light above us. It was a heavy watch. It had weight. It had history. Giving it up felt like cutting off a finger, but in war you sacrifice the limb to save the body. I held it out. Phone first, I said. Tyrell hesitated. He was street smart, but he wasn't battle-tested. He handed me the phone unlocked. I handed him the watch. He shoved it into his pocket so fast I almost missed it. 5 minutes, Pops, he said, lighting his cigarette and turning his back to me to keep watch. Don't make me regret this. I walked to the edge of the dock where the signal was strongest. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I didn't need to look up the number. I had memorized it 20 years ago. It was the number of a man who I trusted with my life in the desert, and the only man I trusted with my estate now. I dialed. It rang once, twice. Vance and Associates, a receptionist, answered. Put me through to Arthur Vance, I said. Tell him it is Big Said. I am sorry, sir, Mr. Vance is in a deposit. Tell him Big Said is calling from the kill box, I interrupted. He will take the call. There was a pause, then a click, then silence. Cedric. The voice was deep, gravelly, and sounded like safety. Where the hell are you? I drove by the house this morning. There was a dumpster in the driveway and a crew tearing out the drywall. I called your cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I am at Green Meadows, I said, keeping my voice low. Jessica put me here. She took my phone. She took my keys. She thinks I am senile Vance. She put on a show with the gas stove and threatened to cut me off from Leo. I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. Vance was standing up. I am coming to get you, he said. I will have a writ of habeas corpus signed within the hour. I will bring the police. I will bring the National Guard if I have to. Stand down, Arthur, I said. What? I said, stand down. Do not come get me. Not yet. Cedric, have you lost your mind? You are in a state facility against your will. That is kidnapping. That is false imprisonment. It is only kidnapping if they keep me, I said. I can walk out of here whenever I want. The security here is a joke, but I am staying. Why? Because the trap isn't set yet, I said. Listen to me, Arthur. Initiate Omega Protocol. There was a long silence on the line. Omega Protocol was a term we came up with 5 years ago. It was the nuclear option, the doomsday scenario. It meant the family had turned. It meant the walls had been breached. Omega Vance repeated softly, You are sure? She sold Bernice's sewing machine. Arthur, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. She put a $50 price tag on it. She is gutting the house. She is erasing us. I heard him take a deep breath. Okay. Omega is active. I am opening the file now. Talk to me, Arthur. What is the status of the deed? She filed a quitclaim this morning, Vance said. I got the alert from the county clerk's automated system. She moved fast. She transferred the title from Cedric Robinson to Jessica Robinson. She also filed a power of attorney document. I let out a dry laugh. And what did the title search say? Vance laughed too. A dark shark-like sound. It said she is an idiot. She didn't run a title search, Cedric. She just filed the paper. She thinks because you signed it, the house is hers. But it isn't, I said. No, Vance said. It isn't. Because Cedric Robinson doesn't own that house. This was the secret. This was the weapon I had been polishing for 5 years. When Bernice got sick, she looked at me one night, her eyes bright with fever and clarity. She told me that Jessica was a wolf in sheep's clothing. She told me that once she was gone, Jessica would come for everything. Bernice was the smart one. She made me go to Vance. We set up the Bernice and Leo Irrevocable Trust. We moved the house, the savings, the investments, everything into the trust. I am just the trustee. I manage it. But I don't own it. Leo does, and the bylaws are ironclad. The trustee cannot sell, transfer, or encumber the assets without the written consent of the trust protector. And the trust protector was Arthur Vance. So the piece of paper she made me sign, I asked. Toilet paper, Vance said. Legally worthless. You can't give away what you don't own. It creates a cloud on the title, sure, but it conveys zero ownership. She holds a deed to nothing. Good, I said. Now listen to me. I need you to do nothing. Nothing, Vance asked. Cedric, she is tearing down your walls. Let her, I said. But the house? It is just wood and sheetrock, Arthur. Let her tear it down. Let her hire the contractors. Let her spend the money. What money? The money she doesn't have, I said. She mentioned loans. She mentioned debts. If I know Jessica, she is borrowing against the value of the house she thinks she owns. She is leveraging a phantom asset. I want her to spend every dime she can scrape together. I continued, my voice hardening. I want her to renovate that kitchen. I want her to put in the marble floors she always talked about. I want her to build a palace for my grandson. And then when the paint is dry and the bills are due, then we pull the rug Vance finished for me. Exactly, I said. If we stop her now, she just walks away. She claims it was a misunderstanding. She plays the victim. But if we wait, if we let her commit financial suicide, she buries herself. She will owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to contractors she can't pay on a house she doesn't own. It is ruthless, Cedric Vance said. I like it. It is logistics, I said. You don't engage the enemy when they are strong. You wait until they have extended their supply lines. You wait until they have spent their ammunition shooting at shadows. Then you cut them off. What about Leo? Vance asked. Is he safe? He is my main concern, I said. She is using him as a shield, but as long as she thinks she is winning, she won't hurt him. She needs him to be the happy heir to her new kingdom. I will keep an eye on him, Vance promised. I will hire a private detail. I will have a man watching the school and the house 24/7. If she looks sideways at that boy, we move in. Thank you, Arthur. How long, Cedric? How long do I let this go on? She said she wants to sell, I said. She wants to flip it fast. She will rush the renovations. Give her a month. Let her finish the work. Let her find a buyer. Let her get all the way to the closing table. I want her to taste the champagne, I whispered. I want her to think she has won. I understand, Vance said. I will prepare the eviction notices. I will prepare the cease and desist for the unauthorized construction. I will have it all ready to drop the second you give the word. One more thing, I said. Name it. My accounts. The personal ones. The ones that aren't in the trust. She has power of attorney, Vance said. She can drain them. Let her, I said. There is only about $4,000 in my checking account. Let her take it. It adds to the theft charges later. It proves malice. It proves she wasn't acting in my best interest. You are a cold son of a bitch, Vance said with admiration. I learned from the best, I said. Stay frosty, Arthur. I will contact you in a week. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the play. I deleted the call history. I wiped the fingerprints off the screen. Tyrell was watching me. He flicked his cigarette butt into the parking lot. Done, he asked. Done, I said, handing him the phone. He took it and looked at the watch in his pocket. Pleasure doing business with you, Pops. If you have any other jewelry, let me know. I can get you pizza, cigarettes, whatever. I looked at him. He was a kid hustling for scraps. He didn't know he was standing next to a man who had just authorized a tactical strike. Just keep your mouth shut, Tyrell, I said. That is all I need. I turned and shuffled back toward the door, dragging my leg again, putting the mask back on. I walked back through the yellow hallways past the nurse's station where the dragon lady was eating a sandwich. She didn't even look up. I went back to room 304. I sat on my sagging bed. The man in bed B was still muttering numbers. I lay back and stared at the ceiling tile that had a water stain shaped like a map of Florida. I thought about my house. I thought about the wall coming down. It hurt. It hurt to think of strangers destroying the home I built. But then I thought about the trust. Bernice was a visionary. She knew that people like Jessica don't change. They just get hungrier. Jessica was about to spend a fortune renovating a house that belonged to her son. She was about to increase the value of Leo's inheritance by hundreds of thousands of dollars using her own stolen credit. She was working for me. She just didn't know it yet. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of the nursing home wash over me. I wasn't a prisoner here. I was a sniper in a hide, waiting, watching. The fox was in the henhouse. She was eating the feed. She was getting fat. But she didn't know that the farmer had locked the door from the outside. And the farmer was hungry too. The burner phone vibrated against my hip bone, hidden deep in the pocket of my trousers. I waited until the nurse with the heavy feet walked past my door before I pulled it out. It was 3 in the afternoon, which meant it was time for the daily intelligence briefing. In the Army, we called it a sit-rep, a situation report. Here in room 304, it was just me listening to my lawyer describe the systematic destruction of my life. I answered on the first ring. Talk to me, Vance. You are not going to like this, Cedric Vance said, his voice heavy with the kind of professional detachment lawyers use when they are delivering bad news. She has gone nuclear. Tell me, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a skull. She hired a contractor this morning, Vance said. A high-end firm from Buckhead, the kind that charges a consultation fee just to park in your driveway. I ran a background check on her finances, Cedric. She is maxed out. She has 5 credit cards and she hit the limit on all of them buying materials. Marble, quartz, imported fixtures. She does not have that kind of money, I said. No, she does not. Vance agreed. But she found someone who does. She went to a hard money lender, the kind that operates out of a strip mall and charges 20% interest compounded weekly. She borrowed $100,000 against the projected value of the house. She leveraged a property she does not own to borrow money she cannot pay back. I closed my eyes. $100,000. She was digging a hole so deep she would never see sunlight again. What is the plan, Arthur? I asked. She is flipping it, Vance said. She wants to turn your colonial into a modern farmhouse. She wants to paint the brick white. She wants to rip out the oak floors and put in gray laminate. She told the contractor she has a buyer lined up for $1.5 million cash. She is counting on that sale to pay off the loan sharks and the credit cards and still walk away with a fortune. $1.5 million. That number was her drug. It was the high she was chasing. She didn't see a home. She didn't see a legacy. She saw a lottery ticket. Is she touching the structure? I asked, my voice low. She is gutting it, Vance said. I drove by an hour ago. There is a 30-yard dumpster in the driveway, Cedric, and it is full. My heart skipped a beat. A dumpster. What is in the dumpster, Arthur? Silence. the kind of silence that screams. "Arthur, tell me. You don't want to know," Big said. "Tell me." "Everything," Vance whispered. She threw it all out, Cedric. Bernice's sewing room, the fabric, the patterns, the antique chair she sat in to read her Bible, the photo albums from the attic. I saw the quilt, Cedric. The blue star quilt Bernice made for your 30th anniversary. It is sitting on top of a pile of drywall. The phone almost slipped from my hand. That quilt. Bernice had spent 2 years stitching that quilt. She had pricked her fingers 1,000 times. It was hand-stitched with love and history. It was the thing I grabbed first when the power went out in winter. It smelled like her, lavender and talcum powder. And Jessica had thrown it in a dumpster like it was garbage. I felt a heat rise in my chest that was hotter than the desert sun. It was a white-hot rage that made my vision blur. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break the window and jump 3 stories down and run the 10 miles to my house and tear that woman apart with my bare hands. I wanted to show her what a logistics commander does to an enemy who desecrates a memorial. Cedric Vance's voice cut through the red haze. "Cedric, stay with me. Do not lose it." "She threw away my wife," I whispered, my voice shaking. "She threw away Bernice." "I know," Vance said. "I know, but listen to me." I retrieved it. "What?" "I went dumpster diving, Cedric. I waited until the crew went to lunch. I climbed in. I got the quilt. I got the photo albums. I got the Bible. I have them in my trunk. They are safe." I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. I sat there on the sagging mattress in the nursing home, and I wept, just for a second. Just one single hot tear that ran down my cheek and dripped onto my hand. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. "I owe you my life. You owe me a bottle of scotch," Vance said. "But listen to me. This changes things. The damage to the house, it is substantial. She is ripping out the copper piping. She is tearing down load-bearing walls to make it open concept. Let her," I said. The rage had cooled now. It had hardened into something brittle and sharp like obsidian. "Cedric, she is destroying your home." "No," I said. "She is destroying her life. Think about it, Arthur. She borrowed $100,000 from sharks. She maxed out her credit. She is pouring concrete and installing marble in a house that belongs to a trust." I paused, letting the image form in my mind. "Every nail she drives is a nail in her coffin," I said. "Every dollar she spends on paint is a dollar she is donating to Leo. She is renovating my grandson's inheritance for free. She is increasing the value of the asset while simultaneously bankrupting herself. It is suicide," Vance said. "Financial suicide. It is justice," I said. "But it hurts, Cedric. I know it hurts to watch. It is agony," I admitted. "But I can take it. I took shrapnel in my leg in '91. I can take this, because I know how it ends." I walked to the window of my room. Outside, the sun was shining on the asphalt parking lot. A delivery truck was backing in. Life was going on. But in my mind, I was standing in my driveway watching Jessica direct the workers. I could see her. She would be wearing a hard hat like a costume. She would be holding blueprints she didn't understand. She would be yelling at the men, telling them to hurry because the interest on her loan was ticking like a bomb. She was high on greed. She was intoxicated by the idea of being a millionaire. She was picking out curtains for a house she had already sold in her mind. She was already spending the money. She didn't know that she was building a castle on quicksand. "How is Leo?" I asked. "He is staying in his room mostly," Vance said. "My private investigator says the boy looks thin. He sits in the window and watches the workers. He tried to save some of his toys from the trash, but Jessica told him he was too old for them. She threw out his army men, Cedric, the ones you gave him. That was the second strike. First my wife, now my grandson. She is isolating him," I said. "She is taking away his anchors. She wants him to be grateful for the new shiny life she is building." "She told him you died," Vance said softly. The world stopped. "What did you say?" "My investigator has a parabolic mic. He heard them on the porch. Leo asked when Grandpa was coming home. Jessica told him that Grandpa had a stroke at the home. She said you were a vegetable, Cedric. She said you were gone. She told him there was no point in visiting because you wouldn't recognize him." I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "She killed me," I whispered. "She killed me in his mind so she wouldn't have to deal with the guilt." "She is a monster," Cedric Vance said. "No," I said. "A monster is a force of nature. A monster has power. She is just a parasite, a tick. And she has gorged herself so much she is about to pop." "How much longer, Arthur?" "She is pushing the crew to work double shifts," Vance said. "She wants it done in 2 weeks. She has a showing scheduled for the 1st of the month. The buyer is flying in from New York. Cash offer. 2 weeks, I said. Can you hold out that long, Vance asked. Can you stay in that place for 2 more weeks knowing what she is doing? I looked around the room, the smell of urine and pine, the man in bed B muttering his numbers, the indifference of the nurses. I can do it, I said. I am on a mission, and the mission isn't over until the target is neutralized. Okay, Vance said. I will keep watching. I will keep collecting evidence. Every invoice she pays, every contract she signs, every dumpster she fills, it is all going into the file. When we drop the hammer, Cedric, it is going to be biblical. It has to be, I said. For Bernice, for Leo. I hung up the phone. I hid it back in the sock. I lay back on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks she would be finished. The paint would be dry. The floors would be polished. The house would look like a magazine cover. She would stand in the foyer feeling like a queen. She would think she had gotten away with it. She would think the old man was rotting away in a home and the boy was under her control. She would think the money was just days away. And that was when I would strike. Not when she was struggling. Not when she was working. I would strike when she was celebrating. I would wait until she was standing at the summit of her mountain of lies. I would wait until she took that deep breath of victory. And then I would push. I closed my eyes. I imagined the house. My house. It was being violated. It was being stripped. But bones are strong. The foundation was solid. It was built by me and Bernice. It could withstand a coat of white paint. It could withstand a month of madness. Because underneath the new drywall, underneath the laminate floors, underneath the lies, the deed was still there, sitting in a vault, protected by ironclad law, waiting. I am coming, Leo, I whispered to the empty room. Grandpa is coming. Just hold on, Scout. Keep your head down. I let the rage burn down to a pilot light, a small blue flame that would never go out. It kept me warm in the cold, sterile room. Let her build, I thought. Let her borrow. Let her spend. Every penny she puts into that house is a penny she is stealing from herself to give to me. She thinks she is the predator. She thinks she is the lion. She doesn't know she is just the fattened calf. And the feast is coming. 30 days. That is exactly how long it takes to paint a lie white. For 4 weeks I sat in that nursing home room listening to the man in bed B count to infinity, while my daughter-in-law burned through money she did not have to renovate a house she did not own. My lawyer Arthur Vance gave me the updates. She had torn out the oak floors. She had painted the brick exterior a blinding sterile white. She had installed a pool in the backyard right over the spot where Bernice used to grow her prize-winning tomatoes. She had turned my home into a showroom, a hollow, soulless box designed to appeal to the new money crowd moving into Atlanta. And she had found them. A couple from New York, cash buyers, $1.6 million. It was a number that made Jessica drunk. It was a number that promised to wipe out her gambling debts, pay off the loan sharks, and leave her with enough cash to never work again. She was already spending the profit in her head. She had already picked out a new car. She had already told her friends she was a real estate genius. The closing was scheduled for Friday morning, the first of the month, the day the loan sharks were expecting their first massive payment. The pressure was on, but Jessica wasn't sweating. She was glowing. I wasn't there to see it, but Vance described it to me with such precision I could feel the air conditioning in the title office. Jessica arrived at the title company downtown at 9 in the morning. She wasn't wearing black anymore. She was done mourning. She was wearing a red dress, bright, screaming fire engine red. It was a dress that said, "Look at me, I am the winner." She wore heels that clicked aggressively on the marble floor and sunglasses she didn't take off until she was inside the conference room. She walked in like she owned the building. She was alone. She didn't bring Leo. She didn't bring friends. Greed is a solitary sport. She wanted the check to have only her name on it. She sat down at the head of the long conference table. The notary, a man named Mr. Henderson, was already there. He was a gray man in a gray suit, the kind of bureaucrat who lives and dies by the paperwork. He had stacks of files in front of him. "Good morning, Ms. Robinson," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We have a lot of documents to get through today before the buyers arrive at noon." "Let's get to it," Jessica said, placing her designer handbag on the table. "I have a lunch reservation at 1 and I don't want to be late." She was treating the sale of my life's work like an errand, like picking up dry cleaning. Mr. Henderson opened the first file. "All right," he said. "First things first. We need to finalize the transfer of the title into your name. The buyers cannot purchase the home from you until you legally own it. I know how it works, Jessica snapped. I have the papers right here. She reached into her bag and pulled out the document I had signed 30 days ago. The quitclaim deed, the paper that she thought was her golden ticket. She slapped it onto the table. My father-in-law signed this a month ago, she said. It grants me full ownership. He is no longer capable of managing his affairs. He is in a facility now. It is tragic, really, but this is for the best. Henderson picked up the document. He examined the signature. He examined the notary stamp from the lawyer she had hired. Everything looks to be in order regarding the signature, he said. Of course it is, Jessica said, checking her reflection in her compact mirror. Can we speed this up? The hard money lenders are waiting for their wire transfer. She didn't say that part out loud, but I know she was thinking it. The clock in her head was ticking. Henderson turned to his computer. I just need to run the final title search and record the deed with the county, he said. It will just take a moment to update the registry. Then you will officially be the owner of record, and we can proceed with the sale to the New York couple. Jessica tapped her nails on the mahogany table. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a predator waiting for the trap to snap. Henderson typed on his keyboard. He frowned. He typed again. He hit the enter key with a little more force. The silence in the room stretched. It went from comfortable to awkward to tense. Jessica stopped tapping. Is there a problem? She asked. Henderson didn't answer immediately. He took off his glasses and wiped them with a cloth. He squinted at the screen. He picked up the telephone on his desk and dialed a number. Yes, this is Henderson in closing. Can you pull the physical file for 42 Oak Creek Drive? Yes, the Robinson estate. I am seeing a block on the digital registry. It says title is restricted. Restricted, Jessica repeated. Her voice went up an octave. What do you mean restricted? There shouldn't be any restrictions. He signed the quitclaim. It is a clean transfer. Henderson held up a hand, silencing her. He listened to the phone. He nodded. He paled slightly. I see, he said into the receiver. Are you sure? Irrevocable. Okay, send me the copy. He hung up the phone. He looked at Jessica. His demeanor had changed. He wasn't looking at a wealthy client anymore. He was looking at someone who had just walked into a bank vault without the combination. Ms. Robinson, he said, his voice professional but cold. We cannot proceed with the recording of this deed. Jessica stood up. What are you talking about? I have the paper. I have the signature. It is notarized. The paper is valid regarding the signature, Henderson said. Mr. Cedric Robinson did indeed sign over his personal interest in the property to you. So what is the problem? She demanded, slamming her hand on the table. The problem, Henderson said, sliding a newly printed document across the table toward her, is that Mr. Cedric Robinson does not own the house. Jessica froze. She looked at the man like he was speaking a foreign language. Of course he owns it. He lived there for 30 years. His name is on the mailbox. He is the resident, Henderson corrected, and he is the trustee, but he is not the owner. According to the county records, which were updated 5 years ago, the property at 42 Oak Creek Drive is owned solely by the Bernice and Leo Irrevocable Trust. Trust, Jessica whispered. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Yes, Henderson explained. A trust established by Cedric and his late wife. The beneficiary of the trust is listed as Leo Robinson, a minor. My son, Jessica breathed. Your son, Henderson confirmed. But here is the issue, Ms. Robinson. The bylaws of the trust are very specific. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without the unanimous written consent of the Board of Trustees. And according to this file, the board consists of Mr. Cedric Robinson and a Mr. Arthur Vance. So get Arthur Vance on the phone, Jessica screamed. Get Cedric to sign another paper. I have power of attorney over Cedric. I can sign for him. Henderson shook his head slowly. I am afraid it doesn't work that way. The power of attorney you have covers Cedric Robinson as an individual. It does not give you authority over his capacity as a trustee. That is a separate legal entity. And furthermore, the quitclaim deed you have here, it attempts to transfer Cedric's personal interest. Since he has zero personal interest in the property, this document transfers exactly nothing. He pushed the quitclaim deed back toward her. It is worthless, Ms. Robinson. You have a signed document giving you the rights to a property he doesn't own. It is like him signing over the Statue of Liberty to you. He can sign it all day long, but it doesn't make it yours. Jessica stared at the paper. Her face, which had been flushed with victory, was now draining of color. It turned gray, then white. But I renovated it, she stammered. I spent $100,000. I borrowed money. I have a buyer. They are coming at noon with a cashier's check. You spent money on a property you do not own, Henderson said. That is unfortunate. But we cannot sell this house today. We cannot sell it tomorrow. In fact, you cannot sell it at all. You have to fix this, she shrieked. Fix it. There is nothing to fix, Henderson said, standing up and gathering his files. The title is clear. It belongs to the trust. If you want to sell it, you need the trust to agree. And seeing as Mr. Robinson is currently in a nursing home and you are trying to sell his residence out from under him, I doubt the trust protector, Mr. Vance, is going to grant that permission. Jessica collapsed into the leather chair. The reality was crashing down on her like a collapsing building. $1.6 million. Gone. The loan sharks. They were real. And they were expecting their money today. The credit card debt. Real. The contractor bills. Real. The ownership of the house. Fake. It was all fake. She had built a financial empire on a foundation of air. She looked at Henderson, her eyes wide with terror. What do I tell the buyers? Henderson shrugged. Tell them the sale is canceled. Tell them you don't have the title. Tell them whatever you want. But please do it outside. I have another closing in 10 minutes. He gestured to the door. Jessica stood up. Her legs were shaking so bad she had to hold onto the table. She grabbed her bag. She grabbed the worthless quitclaim deed. She walked out of the conference room. She walked past the reception desk. She walked out into the bright Atlanta sunlight. But she didn't look like a winner anymore. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was standing on the train tracks, and the whistle she heard wasn't a bird. It was the express train, and she was tied to the rails. I sat in my room at Green Meadows and smiled. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew the look. I had seen it on the faces of enemy commanders when they realized their supply lines were cut. It is the look of total, absolute defeat. But I wasn't done. Cutting the supply line was just the beginning. Now it was time to surround the enemy. I reached into my sock and pulled out the phone. I dialed Vance. She just left the title office, Vance said, his voice rich with satisfaction. My source inside said she looked like she was going to vomit. Good, I said. Now execute phase 2, eviction, Vance asked. Eviction, I confirmed. And Arthur? Yes, Biggs said. Call the contractor. Tell him the person who hired him had no authority to modify the structure. Tell him the trust is filing a lawsuit for damages. You want to sue her for improving the house. She didn't improve it, I said. She vandalized it. She destroyed my memories. I want her to pay for every brick she touched. Understood, Vance said. I am serving the papers today. I hung up. The sun was shining through the bars of my window. It looked beautiful. Jessica was about to have a very bad day. And the worst part for her wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the realization that the old man she threw away was the one holding the remote control to her life. And I had just pressed delete. That signature is real, she screamed, slamming her hand down on the polished mahogany table so hard that the water pitcher rattled. It is his handwriting. I watched him sign it. I have witnesses. You cannot tell me that this paper is worthless. Mr. Henderson did not flinch. He was a man who had spent 30 years looking at deeds and titles and liens. He had seen angry ex-wives and greedy children before. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked at Jessica with the kind of pity you save for a person who has just stepped off a cliff and has not realized that gravity is about to take over. He slid a second document across the table. It was older. The edges were soft. It had a gold seal embossed on the bottom. Ms. Robinson, he said, his voice calm and level. I am not disputing the authenticity of the signature. I am sure Mr. Cedric Robinson signed the quitclaim deed you provided, but there is a fundamental principle in property law. You cannot give away what you do not own. Jessica snatched the document up. Her eyes scanned the lines frantically, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. What are you talking about? She hissed. It is his house. He bought it 30 years ago. He pays the taxes. He mows the lawn. He is the occupant, Henderson corrected gently. And he is the trustee. But look at line 4. Jessica looked. Her eyes widened. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue that was starting to melt under the heat. The Bernice and Leo Irrevocable Trust, she whispered. The words came out choked, like she was swallowing broken glass. Correct, Henderson said. 5 years ago, after the passing of his wife, Mr. Robinson transferred the title of the property into this trust. The primary beneficiary is listed as Leo Robinson, his grandson. The terms of the trust are quite strict. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or leveraged without the unanimous written consent of the Board of Trustees and the trust protector. "And who is the trust protector?" Jessica asked, though I think she already knew the answer. "Mr. Arthur Vance," Henderson said. "And I spoke with Mr. Vance 20 minutes ago. He informed me that not only did he not consent to this sale, but that the trust is currently preparing a lawsuit regarding unauthorized modifications to the property." Jessica dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to her expensive red heels. She fell back into the leather chair. Her legs gave out. "You mean," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, "you mean I don't own it?" "You do not own it," Henderson said. "The quitclaim deed you have is legally null." Mr. Robinson signed over his personal interest in the property. "Since his personal interest is zero, you received exactly zero. It is a symbolic gesture, Ms. Robinson. It holds no weight." The silence that filled the conference room was heavy. It was the weight of $100,000 pressing down on Jessica's chest. $100,000. That was the money she had borrowed from the hard money lenders, the sharks who charged 20% interest a week, the men who didn't send late notices, they sent guys with tire irons. She had borrowed that money to renovate a house she didn't own. She had torn down walls. She had installed imported marble. She had put in a pool. She had literally poured a fortune into my grandson's inheritance, thinking she was feathering her own nest. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:30. The loan sharks were expecting their first payment at 5 o'clock today. She was supposed to pay them from the proceeds of the sale, from the $1.6 million she was supposed to get from the New York couple waiting in the lobby. But there was no sale. There was no check. There was only a debt that was about to eat her alive. "What about the buyers?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The couple from New York. They have the cash. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe they can pay the trust, and the trust can pay me for the renovations." Henderson shook his head slowly. He started gathering his files, putting them back into his briefcase. "I am afraid not, Ms. Robinson. I have a duty to inform the potential buyers that the title is clouded and that there is pending litigation regarding the property. No title insurance company in the world would touch this transaction. The sale is dead." He stood up. He buttoned his gray suit jacket. "I suggest you contact a lawyer, Ms. Robinson. A criminal defense lawyer might be appropriate, considering you attempted to sell property that did not belong to you. That is fraud." He walked out of the room. He didn't look back. Jessica sat there alone at the long table. The air conditioning hummed. The city noise drifted up from the street below. She looked at her hands, the hands that had signed the contracts with the renovation crew, the hands that had thrown my wife's quilt into a dumpster. She started to shake. It started in her hands and spread to her shoulders. She had played the game. She thought she was the queen. She thought I was just a pawn, a senile old piece of wood to be moved off the board. She didn't realize that I was the one who built the board. Back in Green Meadows, I was sitting by the window watching a squirrel run along the power line. My burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Vance. "Target destroyed, sale canceled. She is still in the conference room. My source says she looks like she is going to be sick." I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a soldier who sees the enemy supply line go up in smoke. She had spent a month digging a hole. She had used a golden shovel. She had worked hard. And now she was standing at the bottom, looking up and realizing that I had just pulled up the ladder. The renovation money was gone. It was sunk cost. She had gifted the trust a brand new luxury home. But the debt was hers. Personal, immediate, dangerous. I closed my eyes. I could almost hear her thoughts. She was running the numbers. She was realizing that she had no way out. She would try to find me. That would be her next move. She would come here to Green Meadows screaming and crying, demanding that I fix it. She would try to bully me into signing the real papers. She would threaten me. But she was too late, because I wasn't going to be here when she arrived. I stood up. I walked over to the closet. I took out my small duffel bag. I walked over to the bed of the young orderly Tyrell. He was on his break, sitting on the edge of the mattress, texting. "Is it time, Pops?" he asked, looking up. "It is time, Tyrell," I said. "Is the ride here?" He nodded. "Out back. By the loading dock. A black Lincoln. Driver said he works for a Mr. Vance." "Good," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the last piece of currency I had, my wedding ring, a simple gold band. I had worn it for 40 years. It was part of my hand. But I didn't need gold to remember Bernice. And I needed to pay the toll. I handed it to Tyrell. "For your trouble," I said, "and for keeping your mouth shut when the lady comes looking for me." Tyrell took the ring. He looked at it. He looked at me. He saw the inscription inside. "Forever." "You sure about this, Pops?" he asked. "This looks important." "It is," I said. "But freedom is more important. Just tell her I vanished. Tell her I walked into the wall and disappeared. Tell her I was a ghost." Tyrell grinned. "You got it," Big said. "You are a ghost." I walked out of the room. I didn't look back at the man in bed B who was still counting. I walked down the hall past the nurse's station where the dragon lady was yelling at a patient. I pushed open the fire door. The alarm didn't sound because Tyrell had cut the wire an hour ago. I stepped out into the sunlight. The air smelled of exhaust and hot pavement, but to me it smelled like victory. A black town car was waiting by the dumpsters. The driver, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, opened the back door. "Mr. Robinson," he said. "Mr. Vance sends his regards." I climbed in. The leather was soft. The air conditioning was cold. "Take me to the office," I said. The car pulled away. We drove past the front entrance of Green Meadows just as a red sports car screeched into the parking lot. I saw Jessica jump out. She was running toward the building, her red dress flying behind her like a distress flag. She looked frantic. She looked desperate. She was running to find a man who didn't exist anymore. The victim was gone. The logistics commander was back in charge. And the war was about to enter its final phase. The silence in the conference room of the title company was heavy enough to crush a tank. Jessica sat alone at the mahogany table, staring at the grain of the wood as if it were a map of her own destruction. Mr. Henderson had left the room with his files, leaving behind only the echo of the words that had ended her life. "You do not own it." Outside in the lobby, the couple from New York was waiting. They were checking their watches, sipping complimentary coffee, expecting to walk out with the keys to a newly renovated colonial farmhouse. They had a cashier's check for $1.6 million in their briefcase. It was so close Jessica could almost smell the ink, but now that money was as distant as the moon. Her phone buzzed on the table. It vibrated against the wood, making a sound like an angry hornet. She looked at the screen. Unknown caller. She knew who it was. It wasn't the bank. It wasn't her mother. It was the hard money lender, the man she had met in the back of a pawn shop 3 weeks ago, the man who had loaned her $100,000 at 20% interest due in full upon closing. Closing was today. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. She couldn't hide. In the world of high-interest street loans, voicemail is considered an insult. She picked up the phone. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "Hello," she whispered. "Ms. Robinson," a voice rasped. It sounded like gravel being ground in a mixer. "Today is the 1st. My associate is near the title office. He is ready to pick up the envelope." I need a little more time," Jessica stammered. "There is no time, Ms. Robinson." The contract was clear. Payment upon closing or the 1st of the month, whichever came first. Both are today. There was a delay, she lied. A title issue. The bank needs 24 hours to clear the wire. Silence on the other end. 24 hours, the voice said. After that, the interest doubles. And Ms. Robinson, we don't send late notices, we send reminders. Physical ones. The line went dead. Jessica dropped the phone into her purse. She felt nauseous. She grabbed her bag and stood up. She couldn't face the buyers. She couldn't tell them to their faces that she had wasted their time. She was a coward. She slipped out the back door of the conference room which led to the employee parking lot. She ran to her car, her red heels clicking frantically on the asphalt. She got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As she peeled out of the lot, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from the contractor. "Hey Jess, the final invoice for the kitchen marble and the pool install is due today. $35,000. The guys need to get paid. Let me know when I can swing by." She ignored it. She couldn't pay him. She couldn't pay anyone. She was driving fast, too fast, weaving through the Atlanta traffic. Her mind was racing. Panic was setting in, turning her vision into a tunnel. The trust. It was the only way out. Henderson had said the trust owned the house. He said the property couldn't be sold without the consent of the trustee. Cedric. The old man. The senile, confused, weak old man she had dumped in a warehouse. He was the key. He was the only thing standing between her and a broken kneecap. She convinced herself it would be easy. He was scared of her. She had broken him that night in the kitchen with the gas stove. She just needed to go to Green Meadows, scream a little, threaten to leave him there forever, and he would sign anything she put in front of him. She would make him sign a dissolution of the trust. She would make him appoint her as the sole beneficiary. She would drag him to the title office in his pajamas if she had to. She hit the gas harder. The red sports car she had leased with the last of her credit limit roared down the highway. I wasn't there to see her panic, but Vance told me later that she looked like a woman possessed. She didn't know that she was racing toward a finish line that I had already moved. When she arrived at Green Meadows, she didn't park in a spot. She left the car running in the fire lane right in front of the main entrance. She stormed through the automatic doors, the blast of hot air following her inside. She didn't stop at the front desk. She marched straight for the elevators, her red dress blazing like a warning flare in the drab beige hallway. She pressed the button for the third floor, stabbing it repeatedly as if sheer force could make the machine move faster. When the doors opened on the third floor, the smell hit her, that mix of pine and decay. For the first time, she didn't wrinkle her nose. She didn't care about the smell. She only cared about the signature. She ran down the hall. Room 304. She burst through the door. "Dad, listen to me. We have to go right now," she shouted before she even fully entered the room. She stopped. The room was quiet. The man in bed A was sleeping. The man in bed B was rocking back and forth, muttering his numbers. But bed C was empty. It wasn't just empty. It was stripped. The mattress was bare, exposing the stained blue vinyl ticking. The thin pillow was gone. The nightstand was cleared off. There was no duffel bag, no picture of Bernice, no old man in a cardigan waiting to be bullied. Jessica stared at the bed. Her brain couldn't process the visual data. "Where is he?" she demanded, turning to the man in bed B. "Where is Cedric?" The man looked up at her, his eyes cloudy. 402. 403. Jessica spun around and ran back out into the hall. She sprinted to the nurse's station. The large woman I called the Dragon Lady was sitting there eating a bag of chips. "Where is he?" Jessica screamed, slamming her hands on the counter. "Where is my father-in-law? Where is Cedric Robinson?" The nurse looked up slowly. She didn't like being yelled at. She licked salt off her finger before answering. "Mr. Robinson checked out," she said, flatly. "Checked out." Jessica repeated, her voice cracking. "What do you mean, checked out?" "He can't check out. He is incompetent. I have power of attorney." The nurse opened a file on her computer. She peered at the screen through her reading glasses. "Actually, Ms. Robinson, according to our records, your power of attorney was flagged as invalid this morning." A lawyer faxed over a revocation order signed by Mr. Robinson and witnessed by a judge. He discharged himself against medical advice technically, but since he is a voluntary admit, he is free to go. "Revocation," Jessica whispered. "But he is senile. He leaves the gas on." "That is not what his chart says," the nurse said. "His exit exam showed full cognitive function. He seemed quite sharp, actually. Sharper than you, apparently." Jessica ignored the insult. "Who took him?" she demanded. "He can't drive. He doesn't have a car. Did he take a taxi? Did he wander off? If he wanders off and gets hurt, I am suing this facility." "He didn't wander off," the nurse said. "He was picked up." "By who?" "A private car," the nurse said. "A very nice car. A black limousine." "A limousine." Jessica blinked. The word didn't fit. "Cedric Robinson took the bus. He drove a 10-year-old sedan. He didn't ride in limousines." "Yes," the nurse continued, enjoying the confusion on Jessica's face. "A driver in a suit came up and got his bag. Called him sir. Treated him like royalty. Mr. Robinson tipped the orderly on his way out. $100 bill. $100. Jessica felt the room spinning. Cedric didn't have $100. She had drained his checking account 2 days ago. She had left him with nothing. "Where did he go?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling with a new kind of fear. Not the fear of debt, but the fear of the unknown. "He didn't leave a forwarding address," the nurse said, closing the file. "He just said he had some business to attend to. Something about pest control." Pest control. Jessica backed away from the counter. Her heels caught on the linoleum. She turned and ran back to the elevator. She had to get out of there. The walls of the nursing home felt like they were closing in on her. She ran out to her car. A security guard was writing a ticket for parking in the fire lane. She ripped the ticket off the windshield and threw it on the ground. She jumped in and sped away. She drove blindly, not knowing where to go. Her house was a construction zone. Her phone was blowing up with texts from the contractor and calls from the loan shark. And now the victim, the pawn, the easy mark, was gone. He was gone, and he had money. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The limousine, the $100 tip, the revocation of the power of attorney. He wasn't senile, he wasn't helpless. He had played her. For a month she had thought she was the predator circling a wounded animal. Now she realized she had been swimming in deep water with a great white shark and she hadn't even seen the fin. She pulled over into a gas station parking lot because she was shaking too hard to drive. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. He knows, she whispered to herself. He knows everything. If he revoked the power of attorney, he knew she had been stealing. If he knew about the trust, he knew she had tried to sell the house illegally. And if he had a lawyer smart enough to file a revocation that quickly, he had a lawyer smart enough to send her to prison. But where was he? She grabbed her phone. She dialed his number. The old number. The one she had canceled. It went straight to a disconnect message. She called the house landline. Maybe he went back to the house. It rang and rang. No answer. She dialed Leo's school. Maybe he went to get Leo. Hello, this is Oak Haven Elementary. Hi, this is Jessica Robinson, Leo Robinson's mother. Is my son there? One moment, please. Jessica waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ms. Robinson, the receptionist, came back on the line. Leo was signed out an hour ago. Signed out by whom? Jessica screamed. By his grandfather, Mr. Cedric Robinson, the receptionist said. He is on the approved pickup list, Ms. Robinson. Is there a problem? Jessica dropped the phone. It fell between the seats. He had Leo. He had the house. He had the money. And she had nothing but debt and enemies. She screamed. A long, guttural scream of frustration and terror that filled the small cabin of the sports car. She hit the steering wheel until her hands hurt. Then she stopped. She took a breath. She had to get to the house. That was her only leverage. The house was still hers in her mind. Her clothes were there, her jewelry. If she could just get inside, she could barricade herself in. She could call the police and say he kidnapped Leo. She could spin this. She was good at spinning things. She dug the phone out from under the seat. She put the car in gear. She drove toward the house, toward the wreckage she had created, thinking she could salvage something from the ashes. But she didn't know that I was already there. I wasn't in a limousine anymore. I was sitting in my favorite leather chair, the one she had tagged for sale. I was drinking a glass of scotch that Vance had poured for me. The house was quiet. I had sent the contractor home. I had told him the job was canceled. He didn't like it, but when I showed him the deed and the cease and desist order, he packed up his tools fast enough. Leo was in the kitchen eating ice cream. He was safe. He was happy. He knew Grandpa was back. I looked at the clock. It was 4 p.m. Jessica would be here soon. She would come expecting a fight. She would come expecting to bully an old man. She was going to find a fortress. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned pleasantly going down. I heard the roar of her engine before I saw the car. She drove like she lived, reckless and loud. She pulled into the driveway, screeching to a halt behind the dumpster that still held my wife's quilt. I stood up. I straightened my vest. I walked to the front door. I didn't open it. I waited. I watched through the peephole as she ran up the walk. She looked disheveled. Her red dress was wrinkled. Her hair was flying in the wind. She reached for the handle. She tried to open it. Locked. She pounded on the door. "Cedric, open this door," she screamed. "Open it right now or I will break it down." I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door. I stood there filling the frame. I am 6'2". I might be 70, but I still have the shoulders that carried crates of ammunition in the desert. I looked down at her. "Hello, Jessica," I said calmly. She tried to push past me. "Where is my son? Where is Leo?" "He is eating chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream," I said, blocking her path. "And he is not going anywhere with you." "Get out of my way," she hissed. "This is my house. I have the papers." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a document. It wasn't a quitclaim. It was a trespass notice. "You don't have anything, Jessica," I said. "You don't have a title. You don't have a power of attorney. And as of this moment, you don't have an invitation to be on this property." She stared at the paper. Her eyes bulged. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "I live here." "Not anymore," I said. "You are a guest who overstayed her welcome. And you caused damage. Extensive damage." I pointed to the wall she had partially demolished. "You broke it," I said. "You bought it. But you can't take it with you." She looked at me with pure hatred. "I will sue you," she screamed. "I will take everything. I will tell the police you kidnapped Leo." "Go ahead," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "Call them. Officer Miller is on patrol in this neighborhood. I am sure he would love to hear about the loan shark you owe money to, or the fraudulent loan application you filled out, or the elder abuse." She froze. The mention of the loan shark hit her like a physical slap. How do you know?" "I know everything I said. I know about the $100,000. I know about the 20% interest. I know about the deadline. Today isn't it?" She took a step back. Fear replaced the anger in her eyes. "Cedric, please," she whispered, her voice suddenly small. "Help me. They are going to kill me." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown my wife's memories in a trash bin. "That sounds like a logistics problem," I said. "And I am retired." I closed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. I heard her scream my name. I heard her pounding on the wood. But the door was solid oak. It held. I walked back into the living room. Leo ran in from the kitchen. "Who was that grandpa?" "Just a salesman, Leo," I said. "Just someone trying to sell something we don't need." I sat back down in my chair. Phase 2 was complete. The enemy was routed. The supply lines were cut. Now all that was left was the cleanup. And Jessica was about to find out that cleaning up a mess is much harder than making one. I sat in a high-back leather chair that smelled like mahogany and old money. It was the corner office of Vance & Associates, located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Atlanta. I was not wearing a hospital gown. I was not wearing the stained cardigan Jessica had packed for me. I was wearing a charcoal gray three-piece suit that Arthur Vance kept in his client wardrobe for emergencies. It fit a little tight across the shoulders, but that just reminded me that I was still strong. I held a crystal tumbler in my hand. Inside was 3 fingers of 25-year-old single malt scotch. It was smooth. It was smoky. It tasted like freedom. Arthur Vance walked in. He is a short man with a bald head and eyes that miss nothing. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like an accountant. That was his camouflage. He walked over to the desk and dropped a file folder in front of me. Then he pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "Look at this, Cedric," he said. "She is spiraling." I looked at the phone. It was a screenshot of a text message thread from Jessica sent to my old number, the one she thought was disconnected. "I know you are out there, old man," the text read. "You think you are clever. You think you can hide behind a lawyer. I spent $100,000 on that house. It is my equity. If you don't sign the release, I will burn it down. I swear to God, Cedric, I will light a match." I took a sip of the scotch. The burn in my throat felt good. "She is threatening arson," I said, calm as a frozen lake. "She is desperate," Vance corrected. "She owes money to people who don't sue. They break thumbs. She is trying to intimidate you into a settlement. She thinks if she threatens the asset, you will fold." I put the glass down on the coaster. I looked out the window at the city spread out below us. From up here, the cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. It gives you perspective. "She doesn't understand logistics, Arthur," I said. Vance sat on the edge of his desk. "Explain it to me," Big said. "In the supply corps, we had a rule," I said. "Never ship high-value inventory to a forward operating base until you have secured the perimeter. If you send a truckload of ammunition to a depot that the enemy still controls, you haven't resupplied your troops. You have just armed your enemy." I looked at the picture of my house on Vance's desk, the picture the private investigator had taken that morning. The brick was painted white. The windows were new. The roof was new. "Jessica just shipped $100,000 worth of inventory to a warehouse she doesn't own," I said. "She put in marble floors. She put in a pool. She upgraded the electrical. And she did it all on a property deeded to the trust." I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "When you improve a property, you don't own, Arthur. That is called a donation. She didn't steal my house. She just renovated it for free. And now she is mad because she can't take the paint off the walls and return it to the store." Vance smiled. It was a cold smile. "So what is the play, Cedric?" "We go home," I said. Vance nodded. "I have a police escort waiting downstairs. Officer Miller. He has seen the text messages. He has seen the video of the gas stove incident, which, by the way, we recovered from her cloud account. He is treating this as a domestic disturbance with a credible threat of arson. We also have the eviction order signed by the judge. Is Leo safe? I asked. My private security picked him up from school 20 minutes ago, Vance said. He is at my house playing video games with my kids. He is safe, Cedric. He knows Grandpa is handling business. Good, I said. Let's go. We took the elevator down to the garage. A black SUV was waiting with a police cruiser right behind it. I got into the back of the SUV. Vance got in next to me. The ride to the suburbs took 30 minutes. I watched the scenery change from skyscrapers to strip malls to the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood. It was the same route Jessica had driven me on the way to the funeral, the same route she had driven me to the nursing home. But this time I wasn't cargo. I was the commander. We turned onto Oak Creek Drive. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the house. It was unrecognizable. The warm red brick that Bernice loved was gone, covered in a stark, blinding white paint. The old oak tree in the front yard had been trimmed back severely to show off the new facade. There was a dumpster in the driveway filled with the debris of my life, and parked right behind the dumpster blocking the garage was Jessica's red sports car. She was there. The police cruiser pulled up first, blocking the driveway. The lights flashed silently, blue and red, bouncing off the white walls of the house. I stepped out of the SUV. The air smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. Officer Miller, a large man with a kind face but eyes like flint, walked up to us. Mr. Robinson, he said, shaking my hand. Good to see you looking well, sir. We have the perimeter secured. Do you want us to go in first? No, I said. This is my house. I will knock. I walked up the new stone pathway. Jessica had ripped out the old concrete and put in slate. It must have cost $5,000. Thank you, Jessica. I walked up the steps to the front porch. She had replaced the front door. It was a massive modern thing with frosted glass. I didn't ring the bell. I pounded on the wood. 3 hard knocks. Open the door, Jessica, I shouted. For a moment there was silence. Then I heard running footsteps. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Jessica stood there. She was still wearing the red dress from the title office, but now it was wrinkled. Her hair was wild. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a woman who had been screaming for hours. When she saw me, she froze. She looked at the suit. She looked at the police car behind me. She looked at Vance standing by the SUV holding a briefcase. Cedric, she whispered. She tried to compose herself. She tried to put the mask back on. She smoothed her dress. She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Dad, she said, her voice shrill. Thank God you are okay. I was so worried. The nursing home said you just ran away. I was about to call the police. Save it, Jessica, I said. I stepped into the foyer. It was breathtaking. She had knocked down the wall between the living room and the dining room just like she said she would. The floors were gleaming white oak. The kitchen in the back had an island the size of a landing strip. It was beautiful, and it wasn't hers. She backed up as I walked in. Dad, please, she said, her eyes darting to the police officer standing in the doorway. We can talk about this. I know you are confused. I know you don't understand what is happening. I did this for us. I increased the value of the estate. You increased the value of the trust I corrected. She flinched at the word. I need you to sign one paper, she begged, desperation leaking out of her. Just one paper, Cedric. The release. If you sign it, I can sell the house today. I have a new buyer lined up. We can split the money. I will give you half. You can go anywhere. You can buy a condo in Florida. Please, Cedric. I owe money. Bad money. I stopped. I looked around the room. I looked at the spot where Bernice's sewing machine used to be. It was empty now, just a patch of expensive floor. You owe money, I asked. Yes, she cried, tears streaming down her face. 100,000. They are going to hurt me, Cedric. They are going to hurt Leo. Don't you say his name, I snapped. My voice echoed in the empty, cavernous room. You don't get to use him as a shield anymore. Leo is safe. He is with people who love him, people who don't throw away his toys to stage a house for a sale. I turned to Officer Miller. Officer, I said, this woman is trespassing on private property. She has no lease. She has no deed. And she has made credible threats of arson against the structure. I would like her removed. Jessica's eyes went wide. She looked at the officer. He is lying, she screamed, pointing at me. He is senile. Look at him. He tried to burn the house down last week. I have video. Officer Miller stepped forward. We saw the video. Ma'am Vance sent it over. We also saw the metadata. We saw that you started recording 10 seconds after the gas was turned on, and we have a statement from the gas company that the safety valve on that model stove requires 70 pounds of pressure to engage. Mr. Robinson didn't bump into it. Someone turned it on purpose. Jessica's mouth opened and closed. She was trapped, ma'am, Officer Miller said. I have an eviction order here signed by Judge Reynolds. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal essentials and vacate the premises. No, she shrieked. No, I paid for this floor. I paid for those lights. This is my house. You paid for the renovation, Vance said, stepping into the room. But as Mr. Robinson pointed out, you don't own the warehouse. You just stocked the shelves. And now management is closing the store. Jessica looked at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure and toxic. You planned this, she hissed. You sat in that nursing home and you let me do this. You let me spend every dime I had. I let you dig, I said. I just handed you the shovel. You are the one who didn't know when to stop. She lunged at me. She raised her hand to scratch my face, her red nails looking like claws. Officer Miller was faster. He grabbed her wrist. He spun her around. That is enough, he said. He marched her toward the door. She was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing the house, cursing the day she met my son. I watched her go. I watched them drag her down the slate steps she had paid for. I watched them put her in the back of the police car. Vance walked up beside me. He looked around the room. Nice floors, he said. Very nice, I agreed. What do we do now, Cedric? Now, I said, walking over to the new floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the backyard pool. Now we change the locks. We get Leo, and we start living in our new house. But what about her? Vance asked, nodding toward the police car. She has bigger problems than eviction, I said. I saw a black sedan pull up across the street. It wasn't the police. It was a nondescript car with tinted windows. It had been following Jessica's red sports car for days. The loan sharks, I whispered. They see the police, Vance said. They won't do anything. Not today, I said. But debts don't expire, Arthur. Unlike family loyalty, debts follow you forever. I turned away from the window. I am tired, Arthur. It has been a long war. Vance put a hand on my shoulder. The war is over, Big said. You won. I looked at the empty space where my life used to be. It was painted over. It was modernized. But the bones were still there. I didn't win, I said softly. I just survived. But survival was enough. I took a deep breath of the air that smelled of fresh paint. Welcome home, Cedric, I said to myself. Welcome home. The sound of breaking glass is different when it hits marble. It is sharper, louder. It echoes like a gunshot. As I stepped through the front door of the house I had bought 30 years ago, that sound was the first thing to greet me. It bounced off the new high ceilings and the open concept walls that Jessica had been so proud of. I walked into the foyer and I stopped. I looked around. It was unrecognizable. The warm oak floors that used to creak when it rained were gone, replaced by cold gray tiles that looked like the lobby of a bank. The walls were painted a stark, blinding white. The smell of Bernice's lavender potpourri was gone, replaced by the chemical sting of fresh paint and construction dust. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a staging area. It felt like a showroom for a life that nobody actually lived. In the kitchen, Jessica was screaming. She wasn't using words, just raw, guttural sounds of rage. I signaled Officer Miller to hang back. I wanted her to see me first. I wanted her to look at the ghost she tried to bury. I walked into the kitchen. The island was massive, a slab of quartz the size of a landing strip. Jessica was standing on the other side of it. She was holding a heavy decorative bowl, one of the expensive trinkets she had bought with the loan shark's money. She raised it over her head and smashed it onto the floor. Shards of ceramic skittered across the tile, stopping at the toes of my polished leather shoes. She looked up. Her chest was heaving. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks, making her look like a raccoon caught in a trap. When she saw me standing there in my three-piece suit holding a glass of scotch, she froze. The color drained from her face, leaving it gray and pasty. You, she whispered. The word came out like a curse. Hello, Jessica, I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a private that his leave was canceled. You have done a lot with the place. It is very cold. She lunged toward the counter, gripping the edge with knuckles that were white. You tricked me, she screamed. You are a liar. You are a fraud. You sat in that nursing home playing the victim while I poured my blood and sweat into this house. I took a sip of the scotch. I let the silence stretch. I let her words hang in the air like smoke. "I didn't trick you, Jessica," I said. "You tricked yourself. You looked at an old man and you saw a mark. You didn't see a father. You didn't see a grandfather. You saw a piggy bank." "I didn't steal anything," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I improved this asset. I made it worth something." "It was a dump, Cedric. It was full of old junk. That junk was my life," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "That junk was my wife's memory. You threw Bernice's sewing machine in a dumpster. You put a price tag on her Bible. You told my grandson that I was a vegetable so you could erase me from his life." I took a step forward. My shoes clicked on the cold tile. "You wanted to play chess, Jessica, but you didn't even know what color pieces you were holding. You borrowed $100,000 to renovate a house you don't own. You leveraged your future on a property deeded to a trust." "It is my house," she shrieked. "I have the quitclaim. I have your signature." I shook my head slowly. "You have a piece of paper," I said. "You have a signature from Cedric Robinson, the individual. But this house belongs to the Bernice and Leo Trust. I am just the manager, and managers don't give away the company store." She stared at me. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room as if looking for an exit or a weapon. "You let me do it," she whispered. "You knew. You knew the whole time, and you let me spend the money." "I let you dig," I said. "I handed you the shovel. I watched you dig the hole deeper and deeper. I watched you borrow from criminals. I watched you max out your credit cards. I watched you destroy the only safety net you had." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that?" "Because you are dangerous," I said. "If I had stopped you on day one, you would have just found another way to hurt Leo. You would have drained the account slowly. You would have poisoned him against me. I had to let you destroy yourself so that Leo could see who you really are. I had to let the wolf starve so the sheep could be safe. You are the monster," she spat. "You are evil. I am a logistics commander," I said. "And in logistics, when you have a liability, you liquidate it." Officer Miller stepped into the room then. He was holding a folded piece of paper. The eviction notice. "Ms. Robinson," he said, his voice booming in the empty kitchen. "I need you to step away from the counter." Jessica looked at the cop. She looked at me. She looked at the house she had ruined her life to build. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, I am not leaving. I paid for this floor. I paid for these cabinets. This is my house." "It is not your house," Officer Miller said, walking toward her. "You are trespassing on private property owned by the trust. The trustee, Mr. Robinson, has revoked your access. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises." "My personal effects," she laughed a high hysterical sound. "My personal effects are gone. I sold them. I sold everything to pay for this." "That is unfortunate," Miller said. "But you still have to go." He reached for her arm. She pulled away, scratching at him. "Don't touch me. This is illegal. I have rights. I have squatters' rights." "You have nothing," I said. "You are not a squatter, Jessica. You are an intruder, and you are violent." I pointed to the smashed bowl on the floor. "That is destruction of property," I said. "And since that bowl was purchased with funds intended for the renovation of the trust asset, technically you just destroyed trust property. Vance will add it to the lawsuit." "Lawsuit?" she gasped. "Oh, yes," I said. "Vance is filing for damages. You modified a structural asset without permission. You compromised the integrity of the home. We are going to sue you for the cost of restoring it to its original condition. Every wall you tore down, you are going to pay to put back up." She looked at me with pure horror. She realized then that it wasn't just about losing the house. It was about losing everything she would ever earn for the rest of her life. "You are going to ruin me," she whispered. "You ruined yourself," I said. "I am just balancing the ledger." Officer Miller grabbed her arm firmly this time. He spun her around and clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists. "Jessica Robinson, you are under arrest for criminal trespassing and destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent." She started to scream as he led her out. She screamed my name. She screamed for Marcus. She screamed for help. I followed them to the front door. I stood in the doorway of the house that felt like a stranger's home and watched them drag her down the slate walkway. She fought them all the way to the cruiser. She kicked at the door. She looked wild. I saw the neighbors watching from their windows. They saw the red dress. They saw the handcuffs. They saw the end of the illusion, and parked down the street the black sedan with the tinted windows turned on its engine. The loan sharks were watching too. They saw their collateral being hauled away by the police. They knew they weren't getting paid. Jessica looked back at me one last time before Miller pushed her head down into the car. Her eyes met mine. She didn't look arrogant anymore. She didn't look greedy. She looked terrified, because she knew that once the police were done with her, the real creditors would be waiting. I watched the police car drive away. I watched the black sedan follow it slowly like a shark trailing a wounded seal. I stood there for a long time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the white brick. I turned back inside. The house was quiet. It was cold. It was empty. It was broken. But it was mine. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up a piece of the shattered bowl. It was sharp. I looked at the quartz island. I looked at the marble floors. It would take a lot of work to fix this. It would take money. It would take time. But I had time. I had all the time in the world. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Vance. "She is gone," I said. "Good," Vance said. "Leo is ready. Do you want me to bring him over?" "Not yet," I said. "Give me an hour. I need to clean up the glass. I don't want him to cut his feet." I hung up. I found a broom in the pantry. It was brand new. Jessica had thrown out my old broom. I started sweeping. The sound of the bristles on the stone was rhythmic. Swish, swish. I was an old man sweeping a new floor in an empty house. But I wasn't sweeping away dirt. I was sweeping away the past. I was preparing the ground for the future. And for the first time in a month, I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a spy. I was just a grandfather getting ready to welcome his boy home. The handcuffs were not yet on her wrists, but the invisible chains were already heavy enough to crush her spine. Jessica stood in the middle of the kitchen. She had gutted, her chest heaving, as she stared at the eviction notice Officer Miller held. She was cornered. She was caught. But she still had that spark of delusion that greed gives to the desperate. She still thought that maybe, just maybe, the money she had poured into this house would save her. She thought the value of the granite and the marble and the open concept floor plan would be her bargaining chip. That was when Arthur Vance stepped forward. He moved with the quiet precision of an undertaker. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document bound in a blue legal folder. It was thick. It was substantial. He walked over to the kitchen island and placed it gently on the cold quartz surface right next to where Jessica was gripping the edge for support. "Ms. Robinson," Vance said, his voice dry and professional. "Before you are escorted off the premises, there is one more matter we need to discuss. The matter of damages." Jessica looked at the folder. She laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that bounced off the hard surfaces of the empty room. "Damages," she choked out. "Are you kidding me? I increased the value of this property by 40%. Look around you. Look at this kitchen. Look at the floors. I turned a dark, dusty old relic into a modern masterpiece. If anything, you owe me. The trust owes me for the improvements." Vance adjusted his glasses. He opened the folder and pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "Actually, Ms. Robinson, according to the laws governing trust assets and real property, any unauthorized modification to a structure is not considered an improvement. It is considered waste." "Waste," Jessica repeated, her face twisting in confusion. "Yes," Vance continued. "You did not have permission from the trustee to demolish the walls. You did not have permission to remove the hardwood flooring. You did not have permission to paint the brick. In the eyes of the court, you have vandalized the property. You have caused catastrophic damage to the structural and aesthetic integrity of the asset." He flipped the page. "This is a civil suit filed by the Bernice and Leo Trust against you personally. We are seeking full restitution for the cost of returning the property to its original condition." "Restitution," Jessica whispered. "We have already contacted a restoration specialist," Vance said calmly, checking his numbers, "to remove the marble, to rebuild the load-bearing wall you tore down, to strip the paint from the exterior brick without damaging the masonry, to source and install vintage white oak flooring that matches the original grain. The estimate is conservative, Ms. Robinson." He looked her dead in the eye. "It will cost approximately $150,000 to undo what you have done, and we expect you to pay every cent of it." Jessica's knees buckled. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. $150,000, she gasped. "Plus the $100,000 I borrowed, plus the interest." "You are ruining me," she screamed. "I made it beautiful. I made it worth $1.6 million. Any buyer would want this." I stepped forward then. I walked across the gray tiles that sounded so hollow under my feet. I stood right in front of her. "It is not about the buyer, Jessica," I said. It is about the owner, and I am the owner. I looked around the sterile white room. You didn't make it beautiful, I said. You made it empty. You tore down the wall where I measured Marcus's height every year on his birthday. You painted over the pencil marks. You erased my son's childhood. I pointed to the floor. You ripped out the boards that Bernice walked on for 30 years. Those squeaks weren't noise, Jessica. They were the music of this house. They were the sound of my wife coming to greet me when I came home from work. You threw them in a dumpster and replaced them with cold stone. I leaned in close. You didn't build a home. You built a flip. You built a commodity. You stripped the soul out of this place because you don't have a soul of your own to put into it. I want my house back, I said, my voice hard as iron. I want the red brick. I want the oak floors. I want the wall back. And if you can't give it back to me, then you are going to pay to rebuild it, every single splinter. Jessica looked at me, and for the first time she saw the true scope of her disaster. She wasn't just broke. She was buried. She did the math in her head. I could see the numbers scrolling behind her eyes. She owed the hard money lender $100,000 plus 20 grand in interest due today. She owed the credit card companies $50,000. And now she owed the trust another $150,000 to fix the damage. $300,000 in debt. And she had no job, no house, no assets. She looked out the front window. The black sedan with the tinted windows was still there, parked down the street. The sharks were waiting. They knew she had failed. She looked back at me. Her face crumpled. The arrogance dissolved into pure terror. "Cedric, please," she begged, dropping to her knees on the hard floor. "I can't pay that. I don't have it. If you sue me, if you take everything, the loan sharks will kill me. They don't care about lawsuits. They want their money. You have to help me. Just sell the house as it is. Please. Take the profit and pay them off. Save me." I looked down at her. She was weeping now, her tears dripping onto the expensive tile she had stolen money to buy. I thought about the nursing home. I thought about the gas stove. I thought about Leo sitting in a room thinking I was dead. I looked at Vance. "Add the legal fees to the total," I said. Vance nodded, writing it down. Cedric, Jessica screamed, grabbing at my pant leg. "You can't leave me like this. I am family." "You were family," I said, pulling my leg away. "Now you are just a liability." And I balanced the books. I turned my back on her. "Officer Miller," I said, "get her out of my house." The officer stepped forward and pulled her up. She was dead weight now. She had no fight left. She was sobbing broken sentences about interest rates and broken kneecaps. They dragged her out the front door. I listened to her wails fade as they put her in the car. I stood in the middle of the kitchen. It was quiet. Vance closed the folder. "She is done, Cedric," he said. "She will declare bankruptcy within the week. But bankruptcy won't clear the fraud charges, and it certainly won't clear the debt with the street guys." "She made her bed," I said. "Now she has to sleep in it, even if the sheets are made of concrete." I walked over to the wall she had torn down. I touched the jagged edge of the drywall where she had stopped the demolition. "Can we fix it, Arthur?" I asked. "Can we really bring it back?" Vance looked around. "We can bring back the walls, Cedric. We can buy new floors. But it won't be exactly the same. You know that." "I know," I said. I looked at the spot where the pencil marks used to be. "But we can make new marks," I said. "Leo is growing fast. We have a lot of measuring to do." I walked to the window and watched the police car drive away carrying the woman who had tried to erase me. She was gone. The debt was hers. The lesson was hers. The house was mine. And I had a lot of work to do. The handcuffs were clicking shut on Jessica's wrists, but she had one final weapon left in her arsenal. It was the nuclear option. The one thing she knew I valued more than the house, more than the money, and more than my own pride. Just as Officer Miller began to guide her toward the front door, she twisted her body with a violence that surprised us all. She didn't scream for a lawyer. She didn't scream for mercy. She screamed for my grandson, Leo. She shrieked, her voice bouncing off the hard white walls of the empty foyer. "Leo, come here right now. Mommy needs you." I froze. I had signaled Vance to keep Leo in the back room with the security detail because I didn't want him to see his mother being arrested. I wanted to spare him the sight of the handcuffs. But Leo is a Robinson, and Robinsons don't hide when they hear their family in trouble. Before the security guard could stop him, Leo ran into the living room. He was wearing his favorite sneakers, the ones with the lights in the heels, and holding a game controller. He stopped dead when he saw the scene. His mother in the grip of a police officer, her makeup smeared, her red dress twisted. his grandfather standing like a statue in a charcoal suit. "Leo, baby," Jessica cried, softening her voice instantly into a terrifying imitation of maternal love. "Come to mommy. Grandpa is being mean. Grandpa is trying to hurt us. We have to leave." Leo looked at her. Then he looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with the kind of confusion that breaks a child's heart. Jessica looked at me and her eyes narrowed. She saw my hesitation. She saw my weakness. "If you let them take me, Cedric," she hissed, her voice dropping so low only I could hear it over the sound of the officer's radio. "I take him. I have full custody. You have no rights. If you kick me out of this house, I will take Leo so far away you will need a telescope to find him. You will never see him again. I will make sure he forgets your name." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the checkmate she had been saving. The house was in the trust, yes. The money was safe. But Leo was a minor, and in the eyes of the law, she was still his mother. If she walked out that door with him, she could disappear. She could poison his mind. She could finish the job of erasing me. I looked at Officer Miller. I looked at Vance. They both knew the law. Unless she was deemed an immediate danger to the child physically, they couldn't strip custody on the spot. I stepped forward, my hand reaching out. "Jessica, don't do this," I said, my voice trembling for the first time that day. "Don't use the boy. We can work something out." I was ready to fold. I was ready to give her the money. I was ready to sign the house over. I would burn the whole world down to keep Leo safe. If the price of his safety was letting this wolf win, then I would pay it. See, Jessica smiled a jagged, broken smile. "I knew you were weak, old man. Tell the officer to let me go. Tell him it was a mistake, or say goodbye to your scout forever." She lunged toward Leo, pulling against the officer's grip. "Come on, Leo," she demanded, her voice sharp. "We are leaving. Grandpa doesn't want us here." Leo stood there. He looked small in the middle of that vast empty room. He looked at his mother's outstretched hands, the hands that were cuffed together. Then he looked at me. And then he did something that changed everything. He didn't run to her. He didn't cry. He took a step back. "No," Leo said. The word hung in the air. It was small, but it was heavy. "What did you say?" Jessica asked, blinking. "Leo, baby, get over here." "No," Leo said again, louder this time. "You are lying." "I am not lying," Jessica screamed, desperation creeping back into her tone. "Grandpa threw us out. He called the police." "You are lying," Leo shouted, his voice cracking with a pain that was too big for his 10-year-old chest. "You told me Grandpa was sick. You told me he was a vegetable. You said he went traveling in his mind and he wasn't coming back." Jessica flinched. That is complicated, Leo. You don't understand adult things." "I understand," Leo yelled, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "I understand that you threw away Dad's pictures." The room went silent. Even Officer Miller stopped moving. Jessica's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "I saw you," Leo sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "I saw you in the garage, the day after the funeral. You took the box with Dad's Army medals, the box with the pictures of us fishing. You put it in the dumpster, Mom. You put it under the drywall so nobody would see. I felt my knees almost give out. My son's medals, the pictures of Marcus teaching Leo to fish, the artifacts of my son's life. She hadn't just sold them. She had buried them in trash. She had tried to throw Marcus away just like she tried to throw me away." Leo wiped his nose with his sleeve. He was shaking, but he stood his ground. He looked like a soldier holding the line. "I climbed in and got them out," Leo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I hid them in my closet. I saved them. Because you didn't care. You only cared about the white paint. You only cared about the pool." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "I am sorry, Grandpa. I didn't tell you because I was scared. She said if I told anyone she would send me away too. She said she would send me to the place where bad kids go." I walked across the room. I ignored Jessica. I ignored the police. I dropped to my knees in front of my grandson. I didn't care about the suit. I didn't care about my bad leg. I pulled him into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed the kind of sobs that shake your whole body. "You did good, Scout," I whispered into his ear. "You did good. You saved the mission." I looked up at Jessica. She looked destroyed. The defiance was gone. The arrogance was gone. She wasn't defeated by a lawyer. She wasn't defeated by a logistics commander. She was defeated by the truth of her own son. She had underestimated him. She thought he was just a child, a prop, a piece of luggage she could drag around. She didn't realize that he was a Robinson, and Robinsons pay attention. She looked at Leo clinging to me and she knew it was over. She had lost her leverage. She had lost her shield. Officer Miller looked at me. "Mr. Robinson," he said gently, "given the statement the child just made about the destruction of personal property and the emotional coercion, I believe we have grounds to place the child in emergency protective custody with a relative." I stood up, lifting Leo with me. He was heavy, he was growing so fast, but I held him effortlessly. "He is staying here," I said. "He is staying with his grandfather." Jessica didn't argue. She couldn't. She just stared at the floor, at the cold gray tiles she had bought with stolen money. "Take her away," I said. Officer Miller nodded. He let her out. This time she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She walked out like a ghost, leaving behind a silence that finally felt like peace. I carried Leo to the couch, the only piece of furniture left in the living room. I sat down with him. I held him until his crying turned into hiccuping breaths. "She threw them away, Grandpa," he whispered. "Why did she do that?" "Because she was lost." "Leo," I said, stroking his hair. "She was lost in a storm of greed. And when you are in a storm, you throw things overboard to keep floating. She threw the wrong things." "I saved the medals," he said. "And the fishing picture." "I know," I said. "You are a hero, Leo. You are the bravest soldier I know." I looked around the empty house. It was scarred. It was damaged. But the cancer was gone. "We are going to be okay," I told him. He looked up at me. "Are you really back, Grandpa? You aren't going to the vegetable place." I tapped my head. "My brain is just fine, Scout. I was just undercover." He managed a small, weak smile. "Stealth mission?" he asked. "Stealth mission," I confirmed. "And the mission is accomplished." Vance walked in from the kitchen. He had been listening. He looked at me and nodded. "I will file the emergency custody order tonight, Cedric," he said. "With that witness statement, no judge in Georgia will give him back to her. She is facing jail time now. Real time." "Thank you, Arthur," I said. I looked at Leo. He was falling asleep, his head heavy on my chest. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him exhausted. "We have a lot of work to do," I said, looking at the white walls. "We have to scrape this paint off. We have to find new floors." Leo mumbled something into my jacket. "What is that, son?" I asked. "Can we paint it blue?" he whispered. "Like the ocean." Dad liked the ocean. I smiled. Tears stung my eyes, but they were good tears. "We can paint it whatever color you want, Leo," I said. "It is your house." I sat there as the sun went down, holding the future in my arms. The war was over. The house was quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, on guard, on duty, and completely at home. The sun was beginning to set over the suburbs of Atlanta, casting long shadows that stretched across the manicured lawn like the bars of a prison cell. I stood on the front porch of the house that had been in my family for 30 years and watched the final act of a tragedy play out in my driveway. Officer Miller had uncuffed Jessica at the edge of the property line. He handed her a pink slip of paper, a citation for criminal trespass and destruction of property. He told her in a voice that brooked no argument that if she set one foot on the slate walkway again, she would be going straight to the county lockup without a detour. Jessica stood on the sidewalk. Her red dress was torn at the hem. Her expensive heels were scuffed. Her hair, which she had spent hundreds of dollars styling, was a tangled mess around her face. She looked like a queen who had been dragged through the mud of her own kingdom. She looked at the house. She looked at the white brick she had painted. She looked at the new windows she had installed. She looked at the empty spot where her sports car used to be before the tow truck I called dragged it away 10 minutes ago. She had nothing. No keys, no car, no house. But she had something else waiting for her. Parked directly across the street under the shade of an old oak tree was the black sedan. The engine was idling a low, menacing rumble that vibrated in the evening air. The window on the passenger side rolled down slowly. A hand hung out holding a lit cigarette. Smoke curled up into the humid air. I saw Jessica freeze. Her shoulders stiffened. She stopped breathing. She knew that car. She knew the men inside. They were the men who had loaned her $100,000 at 20% interest. They were the men who didn't care about lawsuits or trusts or family drama. They operated on a simpler set of laws. You borrow, you pay, or you bleed. She looked at the car. Then she looked at the empty street. There was nowhere to run. She couldn't outrun a car in heels. She couldn't hide. Panic, pure and primal, seized her. She spun around and ran back toward the gate. She gripped the iron bars I had installed, the bars she had hated because they were old-fashioned. Now she clung to them like a prisoner on death row. "Cedric," she screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "Cedric, please, you have to help me. Look across the street. Do you see them? They are here." I walked down the porch steps slowly. I didn't rush. I walked with the measured pace of a man who has nothing left to fear. Vance stood behind me, watching silently. I stopped 5 feet from the gate. "I see them, Jessica," I said. "They look like patient men. They are going to kill me," she sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "They want the money today. I don't have it. You took it all. You took the house. You took the sale. You have to give me something. Just a loan. Give me 10,000, just enough to buy me a week. Please, Cedric. I am the mother of your grandson. You can't let them hurt me." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had smirked at my son's funeral, the woman who had put a price tag on my wife's sewing machine, the woman who had looked my grandson in the eye and told him I was dead. I didn't feel anger anymore. Anger is a hot emotion. It burns you up. I just felt cold. I felt the cold clarity of a judge passing a sentence. "I am not your bank, Jessica," I said, "and I am certainly not your savior. You dug this hole with both hands. You borrowed money you couldn't pay to steal a house you didn't own. That is not a mistake. That is a lifestyle." "But I will work," she begged, falling to her knees on the concrete. "I will pay you back. I swear. I will get a job. I will do anything. Just help me this one time. For Leo. Do it for Leo. Don't you dare," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "Don't you dare use his name again. You lost that right when you threw his father's medals in the trash. Leo is safe. He is inside eating dinner. He doesn't know you are out here begging, and I am going to keep it that way." I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. Jessica's eyes widened. She thought I was reaching for a checkbook. She thought I was reaching for cash. Hope flared in her eyes, a desperate, hungry flame. I pulled out a small white card. It wasn't a check. It wasn't cash. I walked to the gate and passed it through the bars. It fluttered down and landed on the sidewalk next to her knees. She picked it up. Her hands were shaking. She read it. "The Atlanta Workforce Development Center." "What is this?" she whispered, looking up at me confused. "It is an opportunity," I said. "It is a place that helps people find honest work. They have programs for warehouse stocking, cleaning services, food preparation. It pays minimum wage, Jessica. But it is honest money." "You want me to scrub toilets?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "I am a real estate developer. I am a designer." "You are a fraud," I corrected. "You are a woman with no skills, no assets, and a lot of debt. If you want money, you are going to have to sweat for it. You are going to have to stand on your feet for 8 hours a day. You are going to have to learn what it means to earn $1 instead of stealing it." "Cedric, please," she cried, dropping the card. "I can't do that. It will take years to pay them back." "Then you better get started," I said. I looked across the street. The door of the black sedan opened. A man stepped out. He was large, wearing a suit that was too tight. He didn't approach. He just leaned against the car and crossed his arms. He was waiting. "Your ride is waiting, Jessica," I said. She looked at the man. She looked at me. She realized finally that the door was closed. The well was dry. The manipulation, the tears, the threats, none of it worked anymore. The old man she had underestimated was made of steel, and she was just glass. She stood up slowly. She wiped her face. She looked at the house one last time. She looked at the window where Leo's room was. The light was on. She knew he was in there. And she knew she had exiled herself from his world. "You are a cruel old man," she spat, her voice filled with venom. "I am a just man," I said. "And justice feels like cruelty to those who are used to getting away with everything." She turned around. She looked at the card on the ground. She hesitated, then bent down and picked it up. She shoved it into her pocket. Not because she wanted to work, but because it was the only thing anyone had given her. She started walking down the street. She didn't walk toward the black sedan. She walked away from it toward the bus stop at the corner. But the black sedan started its engine. It pulled away from the curb, slowly creeping along behind her. They weren't going to let her go. They were going to follow her. They were going to remind her every minute of every day that she owed a debt. I watched her go. A woman in a torn red dress walking alone in the dark, followed by her own mistakes. She had lost the house, she had lost her son, she had lost the money, and in the end, she had lost herself. I waited until she turned the corner and the taillights of the sedan disappeared. Then I turned to Vance. "Is it done?" I asked. "It is done," Vance said, closing his briefcase. "The title is secure. The custody order is filed. She is out, Cedric. Completely out." I nodded. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying since the day Marcus died. I looked at the gate. I tested the lock. It was solid. I walked back up the steps to the porch. I turned and looked out at the neighborhood. The streetlights were coming on. It was quiet. I went inside and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Click. I walked into the living room. Leo was sitting on the couch with a bowl of empty ice cream. He looked up at me. "Is she gone?" "Grandpa?" he asked quietly. "Yes, Scout," I said, sitting down next to him. "She is gone. Is she coming back?" "No," I said, wrapping my arm around his small shoulders. "She isn't coming back." Leo leaned his head against me. "Okay," he whispered. "Can we watch a movie now?" "Yes," I said. "We can watch whatever you want." He picked up the remote. He chose an action movie. Something loud. Something with heroes and villains. I watched the screen, but I wasn't really seeing it. I was thinking about the card I gave Jessica. I was thinking about the long, hard road she had ahead of her. I didn't pity her. I had given her a chance. I had given her the truth. And now I had given myself the only thing that mattered. Peace. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my grandson laughing at the movie. It was the best sound in the world. It sounded like victory. The silence that followed Jessica's departure was not empty. It was heavy with the dust of demolition and the echo of a door slamming shut on a painful chapter of our lives. For the first few days, Leo walked around the house like a ghost, haunting his own life, avoiding the white walls and the cold floors as if they might bite him. He slept in my room on a cot I set up because he was too afraid to be alone in the room where his mother had thrown away his toys. I didn't push him. I let him heal at his own pace. But while he healed, I went to work. Jessica had been right about one thing. Renovations are expensive. But she was wrong about who could afford them. She looked at my old truck and my worn-out cardigans, and she saw poverty. She saw a fixed-income pensioner who clipped coupons. She didn't know about the logistics contracts I consulted on in the 90s. She didn't know about the patents I held for supply chain management software. She didn't know that for 40 years I had invested 50% of every paycheck into boring, reliable index funds. I wasn't just comfortable. I was wealthy. But I was wealthy the old-fashioned way. Quietly. I called Mr. Henderson, the master carpenter who had built the pews at my church. He came over and walked through the wreckage. He looked at the load-bearing wall Jessica had removed, and he shook his head. He looked at the cheap laminate flooring she had billed as luxury, and he sighed. "It is a mess, Cedric," he said, rubbing his chin. "To do this right, to bring back the soul of this house, it is going to cost you." I walked into my study, which was the only room Jessica hadn't touched because she couldn't pick the lock. I opened my floor safe. I pulled out my checkbook. The real one. Not the decoy account I kept for day-to-day expenses. "Do it right, Henderson," I said, handing him a deposit that made his eyebrows jump. "I don't want it to look new. I want it to look like it never happened." The next 3 months were a symphony of restoration. I didn't hire a crew of strangers. I hired craftsmen. Men who knew the difference between quarter-sawn oak and cheap pine. Men who took their time. Leo watched them. At first he just sat on the stairs hugging his knees, but slowly his curiosity got the better of him. He started asking questions. "Why are you sanding that wood? Why do you use that kind of nail?" One morning I handed him a tool belt. It was too big for him, so we punched new holes in the leather until it fit. "You are not just watching anymore, Scout," I said. "You are on the crew." "Me?" he asked, his eyes wide. "But I don't know how to build." "Then you will learn," I said. "Grab that sandpaper. The banister needs to be smooth." We worked side by side. I taught him that you measure twice and cut once. I taught him that if you make a mistake, you don't cover it up with paint, you tear it out and do it again. We ripped up the gray tiles in the kitchen. Underneath, we found the original subfloor, scarred but solid. We laid down warm, honey-colored planks that glowed when the sun hit them. We painted the walls a soft sage green, the color Bernice had always loved because she said it felt like spring. The house began to breathe again. The chemical smell of Jessica's ambition faded, replaced by the smell of sawdust and wood polish and home cooking. But the real work was in the backyard. Jessica had dug a massive hole for a pool right in the middle of Bernice's rose garden. It was an ugly, gaping wound in the earth filled with muddy water and debris. I called a truck to fill it in. 3 dump trucks of dark, rich soil. When it was level, I took Leo to the nursery. We walked down the aisles of roses. "Which ones did Grandma like?" Leo asked, touching a velvet petal. "She liked the red ones," I said. "The Mr. Lincolns. They are strong. They have thorns. But they bloom even after a hard winter." We bought 20 bushes. We bought bags of fertilizer. We bought mulch. That weekend we planted. It was hard work. The Georgia sun was hot and the ground was full of roots. Leo dug until his hands were blistered. He sweated. He got dirt on his face. At one point he threw down his shovel. "Grandpa, this is too hard," he said, wiping his forehead. "Why didn't we just keep the pool? A pool is fun." I leaned on my shovel. I looked at him. "A pool is fun, Leo," I said. "But a pool is just water. It doesn't grow. It doesn't change. You just float in it." I pointed to the small stick of a rose bush we had just put in the ground. "This is life," I said. "It takes work. You have to feed it. You have to prune it. You have to protect it from bugs and frost. But if you do the work, it gives you something back. It gives you beauty. It gives you a smell that reminds you of the people you love." Leo looked at the bush. He looked at his dirty hands. "Mom hated dirt," he whispered. "She said gardening was for people who couldn't afford a landscaper." I knelt down beside him. "Your mother was wrong, Leo," I said softly. "There is no shame in dirt. Dirt is where everything comes from. The food you eat, the cotton in your shirt, the wood in this house, it all comes from the dirt. Being afraid to get your hands dirty is being afraid to live." He thought about that. He picked up his shovel. "Okay, Grandpa," he said. "Let's dig." We finished the garden as the sun went down. We sat on the back porch drinking lemonade, our muscles aching in that good, satisfying way that lets you sleep without dreams. Grandpa Leo said, looking out at the rows of fresh earth, "Are we rich?" I looked at him. I could have lied. I could have told him we were poor to keep him humble, but he had been lied to enough. "We have money, Leo," I said. "We have enough money that you will never have to worry about a meal. You will go to college. You will have a start in life. So we are rich," he said. "No," I corrected him. "I have money. You have potential. There is a difference." He frowned. "What is the difference?" "The money in the bank is mine," I said. "I earned it. I drove trucks. I managed warehouses. I saved. If I give it to you, it is just paper. But if you learn how to work, if you learn how to build like we did with the floor, if you learn how to grow like we did with the roses, then you are rich. Because nobody can take that away from you." "Like Mom took the house?" he asked. "Exactly," I said. "She tried to take the house because she thought ownership was just a piece of paper. She didn't understand that ownership is stewardship. It is caring for things. She lost it because she didn't know how to keep it." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I have something for you," I said. I opened it. Inside was a gold pin. It was small, a tiny compass. "This was your father's," I said. "He got it when he joined the Scouts. He wore it on his lapel for luck." Leo took the pin. He held it like it was a diamond. "She didn't throw this away?" he asked. "She missed it," I said. "I found it in the bottom of his tackle box." Leo pinned it to his shirt. He stood up straighter. "I am going to keep it safe," he said. "I know you will scout," I said. The months passed. The roses took root. The first buds appeared tight and red. The house was finished. It didn't look like a magazine cover anymore. It looked like a home. There were books on the shelves. There were boots by the door. There was the smell of bacon on Sunday mornings. One afternoon I saw a car pull up across the street. It was a beat-up sedan. I watched from the window. It was Jessica. She looked different. She was wearing a uniform, a blue vest. She looked tired. She looked older. She stood on the sidewalk looking at the house. She looked at the new roses blooming in the front yard. She looked at the oak tree that was finally starting to grow back its branches. Leo walked up beside me. He saw her too. He didn't run to the door. He didn't hide. He just watched. "Does she want to come in?" he asked. "No," I said. "She is just looking." She looks sad, Leo said. She is realizing what she lost. I said. She stood there for a long time. Then she turned and walked away toward the bus stop. She walked with a heavy step, the step of someone carrying a burden that can never be put down. Leo took my hand. Come on, Grandpa, he said. We have to water the roses. Mr. Lincoln is thirsty. We walked out into the sunshine. I turned on the hose. The water sparkled in the light. I looked at my grandson. He was taller. His shoulders were broader. He was laughing as the water splashed his boots. He was going to be fine. We were going to be fine. The storm had passed. The wreckage was cleared. And in the garden life was blooming again, red and strong and full of thorns. The rocking chair creaked against the porch floorboards. It was a rhythmic sound, a comforting sound. It was the sound of a house settling back into its bones after a long fever. I sat there with a glass of iced tea in my hand, watching the fireflies start to dance above the lawn. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the deep, rich scent of the Mr. Lincoln roses we had planted. They were in full bloom now, dark red and velvety, just the way Bernice liked them. Leo was sitting on the top step. He wasn't playing on a tablet. He wasn't staring at a screen. He was holding a small piece of cedar wood and a piece of sandpaper. He was smoothing out the edges, making something real with his hands. He was wearing jeans that had grass stains on the knees and a t-shirt that smelled like sunshine. He looked up at me and smiled. It wasn't the scared smile of the boy at the funeral. It was the confident smile of a young man who knows he is safe. Grandpa, he said, the rose bush by the gate. It has a new bud. I nodded, taking a sip of the tea. The tartness of the lemon mixed with the sweetness of the sugar. It tasted like summer. That means it likes the soil, Scout, I said. It means the roots are taking hold. He went back to sanding. The sound was soft. Shh, shh. I looked out at the street. It was quiet. No construction trucks, no red sports cars, no black sedans with tinted windows. The neighborhood had returned to its peaceful slumber. The neighbors waved when they walked by. They didn't look at us with pity anymore. They looked at us with respect. They saw the house not as a renovation project, but as a fortress. I thought about the last year. I thought about the cold nights in Green Meadows. I thought about the smell of gas in the kitchen. I thought about the look on Jessica's face when the handcuffs clicked shut. It felt like a different lifetime. It felt like a war story I would tell Leo when he was older. I looked at my hands. They were old hands, calloused, wrinkled. But they were strong hands. They had built this porch. They had reclaimed this life. Jessica had looked at these hands and seen weakness. She had looked at my gray hair and seen a target. She didn't understand that age isn't an expiration date. It is a credential. It means you have survived things that would kill a lesser person. Leo blew the dust off his woodblock. Grandpa, he asked, do you think she is okay? He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I took a moment. I didn't want to lie to him, but I didn't want to burden him with the harsh truth of the streets either. She is where she chose to be, Leo, I said. She is walking a path she paved herself. It is a hard path, but maybe it will teach her how to walk straight. Do you miss her? He asked. I looked at the empty spot in the driveway where her car used to sit. I miss the idea of her, I said. I miss the family we could have been, but I don't miss the storm, Leo, and I definitely don't miss the rain inside the house. He nodded, understanding. He went back to his work. I leaned my head back against the chair. I closed my eyes. I could feel Bernice here. She was in the wind chimes singing on the eaves. She was in the smell of the roses. She was in the laughter of the boy sitting on the steps. She would be proud. We had held the line. We had protected the perimeter. The logistics of life are simple, really. You take care of your people. You protect your assets. And you never, ever let the enemy see your supply lines. I opened my eyes. The sun was gone now. The streetlights were flickering on. Leo stood up. He brushed the sawdust off his pants. I think I am done, Grandpa, he said, holding up the wood. It was smooth. It was simple. It was imperfect. It is beautiful, Scout, I said. What is it? It is a doorstop, he said, to keep the front door open, so the fresh air can come in. I smiled. A doorstop. That is a good invention, I said, but let's bring it inside. It is getting late, and we have an early start tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow, I said, standing up and stretching my bad leg. We are going to build a birdhouse for the cardinals. Bernice loved the cardinals. We walked inside together. The house was warm. The sage-green walls wrapped around us like a blanket. The oak floors creaked a welcome. I locked the door, not out of fear, but out of habit. I walked to the kitchen and put my glass in the sink. I looked at the reflection in the window. An old man and a boy. We were the last of the Robinsons, and we were enough. I turned off the light. Greed is a fire that consumes the arsonist first. My daughter-in-law saw an old man and thought victim. She didn't realize that wrinkles are just battle scars from wars she couldn't even imagine fighting. I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted to protect my grandson's future. Family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty. If you break that trust for $1, don't be surprised when you end up with neither. Protect your legacy, watch your circle, and never ever sign a paper without reading the fine print. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Turn on notifications so you never miss a beat. Let me know in the comments below, would you have given Jessica a second chance, or did she get exactly what she deserved? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and watch your six.